target area, took pictures again, confirmed virtually, I had my visuals on him. I even exchanged pleasantries with him. Saw him, saw his elder brother to Chuku Ekweme. It was a twin duplex. They were preparing for burial. So I came in. There was no network whatsoever there. There was no way I could communicate back to command. So I sent Jesse Patrick a text telling him I had eyes on the target. The text did not go through. I had to trek from where I was back to the FOB. So getting there, we managed to get network. I communicated them. Started coming down. On getting there, while they got back, they got to the FOB, we started planning again. I went back the second time, now with a different vehicle. I went back to confirm whether he was still around, because while I was going out the first time, he was leaving. He was leaving with his blue Honda Crosster with a Lagos plate number. So he drove past me, so I came back to confirm he wasn't around anymore. So on my way leaving, I discovered he was driving in again. So I quickly went back and told Jesse Patrick that he was back and the team was ready to move. There was a joint operation compromising of the military, the police, and the AVG, a number of AVG. So, cut long story short, we came in, did the operation, and got the guy, got him and his elder brother. Before then, the target was him, but along the line, I discovered his brother too had ties to ESM. He lives in Italy, while the target lived in Turkey, Istanbul.
I wanted to play this a little bit because I don't want to go on. I don't want to finish it because we are out of time. I believe somebody will do justice to this this voice note, and I believe that you must have heard this voice note. It's been trending on Facebook, so I believe that you must have heard it. I just want to pick one thing, just one thing. I just want one thing because I am out of time. And what I want to pick out of it is, have you ever seen ESN commit crimes? The answer is no. ESN has on several occasions, actually, the work of ESN is to stop those who are committing crimes. And the world knows this. Everybody knows this. ESN are disciplined people. Now, I am not trying to say that this exercise happened or it did not happen. No. I just want you to understand one thing from where I am standing. Now, this is a government that are ready to fight those who are trying, who are doing their best to protect the lives of the innocent. Get my point. It is the government that their number one responsibility is not the terrorists in the forest, but those who are actually fighting against the terrorists. There has never been any IPOB member that has been convicted in Nigeria, in the zoo, in anywhere actually. IPOB is a peaceful organization. Our plan is only the restoration of Biafra through legal means, through UN supervised referendum. The plan of Nigeria government is to fight those who are telling them to respect the law, and they are even proud of it. Now, I don't want to go into a lot of analysis of this voice note because I know our people are very intelligent. So I just want to make you understand that this is a government that recruits terrorists into their army and then use terrorists to fight those who are fighting against terrorists. You get where I'm coming from now. And those who are contesting for elections in Nigeria right now are supporting it. They are supporting it. They might have not come out to say, I support this, I support the recruitment of terrorists into the army, but they are silently supporting it, silently implementing plans that will sustain the continuous recruitment of terrorists into the army to guide you. How can terrorists guide you? Now, this is a country where they are talking about election, at the same time paying people not to have election in Biafra land, because they want to create anarchy. They want to create tension. They want you not to be able to live your life like you should. They want to hold you hostage. Now, this is the government that people are trying to promote, that people are talking about continuing that zoo. The same people who have not said any word, the people who their people are killed, their fellow people they call their brothers and sisters, fellow Nigerians are killed. And what do? They keep quiet. They keep quiet. I am already out of time. I opened the line earlier on, but right now I am out of time and I cannot answer any call. I see calls coming in, but it's very unfortunate at this point that I cannot answer this call. I will end it here by saying I know somebody will come in and properly analyze this voice note. Somebody who has more who has more to give, because right now I am out of time, and I want to thank you so very much for being part of this program this evening. I say thank you very much. May Chukwu Kikabiama bless us. I want to thank our leader, Hamadike Biafra, the man who has done what nobody else can do, what nobody else has been able to do for us. Not my father, not my mother, not yours even. It is Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. And the DOS, I salute all of you. Thank you for your good work. May Chukwu Kikabiama continue to bless and guide you. And to you all listeners, I thank you very much. Please stay tuned. We are not going off air anytime soon. We are here. We are here. We are here. You know, you can listen to us from our website at radiobiafra.co. You can also tune in at 102.1 FM. You can also listen from our apps, various apps we have. You can tune in and listen to us. I say have a wonderful CO. You can also tune in at 102.1 FM. You can also listen from our apps, various apps we have. You can tune in and listen to us. I say have a wonderful
all over the world is ready too. Doctor, let's do this.
Greetings. It's from part 4, because the last part we were talking about the killing fields. We mentioned Katsina, we mentioned Kaduna. Today we're going to briefly mention Kanji Dam and Kanu. The reason I'm talking about the killings in the north, because it was the actual killings that triggered the declaration of Biafra, because there was no trust for anywhere in Nigeria where the people of Eastern origin could safely call their own without being killed. And if we fail to understand that history, then it's difficult to understand why Biafra was declared. The people will have a different narrative and blame us for being killed. So let me go straight into it. So the reason why I'm going on about it is because it was documented. It's not hearsay. It's not what my relative told me. This was a government-led instruction to be written down in front of a high court judge, Justice of New Case Tribunal. They recorded the survivors' tale of what happened to them. It took them 49 days. They had evidence from 253 survivors. They exhibited 498 exhibits. They traveled from Enugu Onitsha, Aba, Port Harcourt, Calabar, Oyo, Ugoja, gathering evidence and detailing and recording them. So no one would turn around and say, this thing didn't happen. This was before we went into Biafran War. So, without further ado, and I urge you all to read it. It's called The Massacre of Ndibo, 1966. So one day it is my hope that every school child, at least in the Biafran setting, would have read it, understood it. So there'll be no more lies about what happened to us. Let me talk about the 4 Ks. I mentioned Kaduna, Katsina. Today's turn is Kanji Dam. Now, where's Kanji Dam? Kanji Dam is around Ilorin, where the Italian firm called Impreglio, SPA, was building a dam for Nigeria to generate electricity. We're still waiting for the electricity in Nigeria. Anyway, so that was back in the 60s. They employed about 6,000 Easterners at this Kanji Dam construction. This was one of the sites of the worst slaughters for people of Eastern origin. This is what happened. It was a combined operation between the police and the civilians. The most important witness was somebody called Clement Obiefuna, who recorded what happened to the situation. So it's not a hearsay, an eyewitness. On the 29th and 30th of September, there was mass killing, which has continued to the worst of them to be in Kanji Dam police station, in front of police station. And this is what happened. A police van was fitted with a loudspeaker. It went round the town, informing any Easterner who wishes to go back to the east to assemble at the police station in order that the necessary arrangement could be made for them to be evacuated. This piece of news, of course, spread, was received with joy for all those of us, according to him, this witness, who wanted to escape. They thought this gesture was, in fact, made in good faith. It was otherwise, as their subsequent experience was to show, was the opposite. So when the remaining Easterners they haven't killed have heard about there will be a possibility of them being evacuated, so they assembled at the police station with all their loads, and they sat down waiting for further instructions for their repatriation. Little did they know that they had come to face their death. So it was, in fact, an appointment with death, according to him, for the next moment. What happened then? A group of unruly Hausas, that's general term for those in the north, appeared once more with their death weapon, chanting war songs, grinning at us, and positioning themselves strategically around the building. After a time, the policemen arrived in great numbers, and they asked us whether we were now ready to go back to the region, to our region. Of course, we joyfully answered yes. Then one of the Hausa civilians stepped out, mockingly asked us if there was anything we could do if he began to shoot at us. Now, before he had time to answer this question, he had already let go of his ding gun in our midst. So therefore, a frantic scramble to escape ensued. The police participated in the killing of many of us. During this shooting, I lost a relative, Mr. Ralph Nwa BC, who was aged 26, a motor driver with Impreglio SPA Kanji. The looting of our property started simultaneously with the killing. From a corner where I was, I could see the police helping the civilians to make away with our property. All my properties were carried. So it's not enough to state all this. This person now had to be cross-examined in front of a judge. And the question is, this massacre at the police station, Kanji Dam, what date would that be? He said on the night of the 29th September. Remember, back in Lagos, they were having a meeting after the July killings to have a discussion on how to move Nigeria forward. There was a meeting going on, and then the killing broke out again in September. Okay, so this was the background. Now, around that time, the thing then in the court was, at what time? He said around 9 o'clock and 10 p.m. when the whole thing started and continued. The next question was, would it be correct to say that Easterners were tricked into assembling at the Kanji Dam police station to enable them to massacre you? The answer was yes. And then he was asked again, and the trick was practiced by, he said, well, it was performed by police. The question, you, law-abiding citizen, trusted the police as your protectors? The answer is yes. Would it be correct to say that were it not for the practice on you by the police, perhaps these vandals might not have had the opportunity to slaughter you as they did? They say they might not have had the opportunity to slaughter Easterners en masse. That's true. Now, immediately before the attack on the 29th, how many Easterners will you estimate gathered at the police station? Or you said very many. Give me an idea. Said about 2,000. Now, during the lengthy cross-examination that followed, the witness gave further details of the police civilian formation and preparation for the attack. Let me cut this story long, which is a bit long, short. Basically, these people brought in new, fresh police officers from a different region in Nigeria to surround the police station and remove the ones they were familiar with, and they were used in addition with mob to kill the people. They went around asking, assemble at the police station if they want to get back to the eastern region. So that's one of the repulsive bits of the killing of the eastern. They were lured into the traps, okay? And so it's not the first time they've done that trick. In Kanu, which we're going to look at shortly, they use the same trick because they say, oh, the train will be leaving such and such a date, so you all gather, and the act made it easier for them to slaughter many more, okay? So that's the trick was being used, and the tribunal uncovered this. So the next, I'm going to move now to Kanu at the time. Kanu, as you know, is it's a very, very busy ancient city in the north. It has a national airport. Okay? So this one was witness called Okpawa, your pardon, P.I. Okpawa. Is witness number 125. So what happened to him? He said, I was shot from the back. They raised the occiput, which is the back of your head, back of your skull. And he fell down and lost consciousness for a time. Had that bullet gone a little deeper, his brain would have been, of course, blown out, and he would have died on the spot. On the other hand, had the wound been a shade slight or less, then he would have lived, and he would not have lost consciousness, and of course the army would have come and shot him like other people. So this is the part of the story which he told us that happened to him in Kanu. He said, one soldier ordered us outside and asked me, this was in the actual airport when they appeared. The other story was that all the big wigs, they came with their white agbada, all the politicians, Manda's clip of the bit of the film they're allowed to show. There was an attack inside an airport terminal, an international airport. The police arrived, the army arrived, and they said, where are the young? And they start shooting, hitting people. So this is a scene from that. Okay, the plane had just arrived from London, parked in Kanu. People are just coming out, disembarking at Kanu. If you're from the eastern region, they lined you up and shot you. They were from abroad. So this is a report of what happened in Kanu. And the people doing the killing are Nigeria's best. In other words, they went to Congo to represent Nigeria, the United Nations force. You have to keep peace in Congo. So they are the police, they are the actual elite of the Nigerian army, if you like, in Kanu. It was actually commanded by Chukwemeka Odumegwu. Yeah, it's a battalion. So where he was, of course, at this stage in the eastern region as a governor, eastern region. So what was left of the Nigerian army in Kanu joined the troops, joined the civilians in massacring ordinary civilians. They burst into the airport, and this is what happened. So one soldier ordered us out and asked me where I was from. When I told him I was from Midwesterner, he told me that I was lying because he knew where I came from. What I heard was a bad turn, quick march. I heard a shot behind me, and I fell down and passed out. How long I was there before I came round, I could not tell. But when I became conscious, a heap of dead bodies, men, were on top of me. Some still breathing, the others stone dead. It took me some time to extricate myself from the dead bodies heaped upon me. I crept over other dead bodies, and I tried to hide because soldiers were still shooting people down in the hiding places in the airport. Presently, I found myself in a big kitchen, and the whole length of the breadth of that was littered with dead bodies. 2 HAUSA stewards in the kitchen refused me entry until I paid them £5. And within seconds of my entry, about 5 armed northern soldiers entered the kitchen, shouting, "Are there any more Opara brothers left to be shot?" Opara, of course, was Dr. Michael Opara, who was the premier of the Eastern region. He wasn't killed in the first coup of January 1966. He was the governor of the Eastern region, and at this stage, the Northerners hate him because he did not agree with the census when they did the census, I believe in 1963 or so. And he said it was inflated and it cannot hold. So they hated him as a result of it. And everybody from the East, they were suspecting them because they wanted the Northerners to give the impression that they have more population than everybody else. But that's a different story. So they hate the Opara brothers. If you're an Opara brother, it means you're from the Eastern region. So they will go around literally hunting them down and shooting them. So he said, "Are there any Opara brothers left to be shot?" Okay, I was again saved because I lay among the dead and pretended to be dead also. So when I could no longer hold out, I got up and walked to the table where one of the stewards was sitting. I shouted, "Please take me to the soldiers." At this stage, I was getting fed up. So he said, "I can no longer stand this strain." Now somebody emerged from under the big table on hearing me. It was Mr. Lekiti. Mr. Lekiti is a Ghanaian who apparently was hiding from the savage soldiers. He decided to give ourselves up to the soldiers. He was my uncle, and I was his nephew. That was the plan. This strategy worked wonderfully. And when the soldiers heard of us, they shouted in unison, "Why were you hiding?" He said, "We don't want to be killed. We don't want to kill Ghanaians. So why are you hiding? They are our friends. Yorubas, Effiks, all are our friends. We are after Opara's brothers." So they're specific. If you're wondering about the definition of genocide, you would normally target a specific ethnic group. So this is an example of it, soldiers themselves declaring that they're after Opara's brothers. Now, we are going to finish them off, he said. They took us upstairs where we saw more dead bodies, some of whom I recognized. Now, Mr. Lekiti and myself gave the soldiers £10 for drink. They drank until 6:30 a.m. the following morning. This happened at night, which was the 2nd of October. The reason why they trapped so many people was the 1st of October, which is an Independence Day, which is a celebration, like a holiday. So people are returning and traveling. So the airport was full of those who are arriving, those who are departing. So they pounced on all the people of the Eastern origin or Opara brothers. Now, these soldiers have some harsh things to say about Opara and Igbos. Opara was their arch enemy who must be destroyed. Why did they kill our leaders while Opera Zik Osadebe were left out? If I wonder who Osadebe is, Osadebe was the one who was the governor of the Midwest, and his name suggests Igbo. Zik, of course, Azikiwe, who was the president, was like a queen equivalent of the first Republic of Nigeria at the time. He wasn't in charge, but he was the first, he was like the queen, the governor general equivalent. So you have Opara who is Igbo, Zik who is Igbo, and Osadebe who is Igbo. They were left out of the January 15 coup. And this was really irking them and really annoying them so much that they want to kill everybody who is from Igbo. Okay, so Mbadive, they said, was the only Igbo man who would be spared on this march to Eastern region. So we're already planning to march to Eastern region. Okay, so this killing was happening in September, end of September, first week of October 1966. They are planning to march to Eastern region because he was a good man. They're saying Mbadiwe is one who had the opportunity to make Enugu an international airport. Instead, he messed up and moved it to the north, as usual. Now, all other Igbos must be destroyed. Of course, that's the impression they give. If you're good to them, then they try and spare you for the time being until they get to you in the end. Now, at 7 a.m. that same Sunday morning, they asked Mr. Lekiti and myself to get ready because we are going to show you how we have dealt with Opera brothers and sisters. So the soldiers took Mr. Okwawa, who is pretending to be the nephew of Mr. Lekiti, who is a Ghanaian. They took us to the railway station in an armed Land Rover, an army Land Rover. And there we saw a sight which I would never live to see again to my dying day. Over 600 men, women, and children have been mowed down. They have been killed while they were waiting for a train to take them to our region. A few of the children were still creeping over their dead mothers, shouting, "Mama, I am hungry," and want to drink. Some were sucking at their dead mother's breasts and left them to suck on. It should be borne in mind that 3 days earlier, this is the annoying bit, 3 days earlier, before this unprecedented massacre, it was announced over the Radio Kaduna, so-called Radio Fusion Kaduna network, that a passenger train would be leaving Kanu for Eastern region on the 2nd of October, and that all those wishing to travel should report to on 1st of October at the railway station. Of course, over 700 Igbos packed to the railway station. The announcement was made by, guess who? A Mr. T. George. Mr. T. George is a senior train officer who incidentally is a native of Idoma. He was educated at Methodist College in Uzakoli. So he was a member of the Nasarawa Club and attended all the meetings where they made the decision to kill all the Igbos in the north. Now, when all the Igbos had entered the railway station, he ordered that the gates should be locked, so they couldn't get out. They drove us to the local running shed. So I just showed the background. We tell you what happened at the Kanji Dam. The police went to the siren. Everybody who wants to go, come to the police station. Here, they made on the radio, Kaduna, very popular, by somebody who they are familiar, hearing their voice, someone from Idoma, who was at the Uzakoli, which is in the east, where he schooled. So his voice is familiar, in order to lure all those Easterners who want to travel back to the east. 700 of them descended. They went to pack their things and go on the bank holiday, which was on the 1st of October, and they were mown down. Okay? So these people say, I want to stop there for now, because that's the experience that was going on in Kanu. So this guy, of course, eventually managed to escape and got home, and this bullet was fished out from his skull, and they lived to tell the tale. So that I'm just sharing this with you all so that you know the background to what happened to your people, to our people in the northern part of Nigeria. So I'm giving you the killing fields of K, Kaduna, K, Katsina, K, Kanji Dam, and K in Kanu. There are so many other towns with similar stories, just killing after killing after killing. So the only killing, the story goes that this killing stopped when? Anyone know? When there was no more Igbos or Nyamaris left in the north to kill. So as a result, there were an exodus, right? You weren't going to be told to hang around in the north. The only thing that's everyone from the east, the only thing in their mind is how do we get home? They abandoned everything. They started walking. Some jumped into a plane that was going somewhere. Some jumped into a train. And when they got to Otupo or near the border of Enugu, as they about to cross the River Benue, the train would stop. The mob would jump in, kill as many as they can, put the bodies back in, so that when they arrive at Enugu, they're injured, maimed, half dead, and so on, to frighten the Easterners. Okay? So that was the killing that was going on. I'll now quickly speed up and take you to the scenario then of what happened when the Igbos or the Nyamalis left the north. Yeah, it would be interesting to know where the houses, the Sabungaris, what actually took place. What happened then? Now you got rid of all the people from the eastern region. So, as evidence, I present before you a report from New York Times. Somebody called Lloyd Garrison, who went back to the Sabungari in the Kanu. Yeah. He went there on the 7th of December to report what was the state of affairs after the Igbos have left Sabungari. Yeah, it's good to look at it now from the other side. He said, after the massacre of over 2,000 Igbos in Kanu in September 29, 1966, and the massive exodus of Igbos that immediately followed, New York Times correspondent Lloyd Garrison visited a deserted and desolate Sabungari Kanu, where the eastern Igbo quarters, and filed this report. Okay, so you understand the background. The killing has now stopped because no more Nyamaris to kill. Okay, now somebody needs to go there and find out what has happened. Okay, so he says outside the old city walls in Sabungari, or strangers' quarters, that's what it actually means, Sabungari, where the quarters in the north, you're not allowed to live inside their walled city because you're a foreigner, you're a stranger. So you left outside. So outside the walled cities, the houses were now empty and the streets were deserted today, except for a stray dog resting in the shade of a tree. The only sound was the creaking of the house doors as they swung gently back and forth in the light breeze. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew several doors shut, and the dog, as if startled by a rifle shot, crouched. The sound left the dog trembling with fear, even now, more than 2 months after the massacre of Igbos in the heart of the northern Nigeria Muslim North. There's little else to remind one of what happened here, except the sight of the occasional litter, the torn Bible on the floor of the Baptist church, and the OK Jazz stationery store. Otherwise, the shops and houses have been stripped of their furnishings, as if no one ever lived there. 30,000 Igbos once filled these dwellings, 30,000. But now, the Sabungari has become quite simply a ghost town. The bloodbath began on the 9th of September 29th, when northern troops opened fire on the Igbo refugees standing by at the airport. By dawn, northern soldiers with automatic weapons and civilians with machetes had swept through the city, burning, looting, and killing. As if by signal, most foreign observers here are convinced that the pogrom was planned. I tell you before that it was not only planned. They didn't just have automatic weapons, rifles, bows and arrows, bricks, anything they can use to kill people. They also have typed, let me repeat that, typed addresses of where the Nnamdi is supposed to live. So it's not something you say is a riot, it just happened. It was planned. And then, the slaying spreads to other Igbo communities in Nigeria, vast northern interests. So that's part of the report. Now, carry on with the report in the New York Times. No one knows how many were killed, and that's the fact. It's difficult to estimate the true number that died. The report, the tribunal were mentioning, and those who escaped with their lives were able to tell the story. There are worse, gruesome stories which cannot be told because the people who it was acted upon have died. So they're not telling you the full story because you can't. It's just impossible. The extent of the calamity that befell our people. But the official census of the Northern Military Nigerian Lagos had approved. You see, you have to approve. They say, well, we're going to agree that 7,000 died. That's that. If 7,000 died, you have to times it by 100, as you and I know. Okay, so that's the one the official government approved. They actually agreed that thousands died. That's the key thing. Now, this is considered to be a conservative estimate. That's according to New York Times. A conservative estimate means it's under exaggerated. Now, Northerners here do not talk about what happened unless you ask them. Surprise, surprise. And their responses frequently include a comment that, the Igbos had it coming to them. Some samples. They were too pushy. So if you're very pushy, you should kill. That's what they're saying. They took the best jobs. Okay, so because they have good jobs, you have to go and kill them. I told you before, there's something called privileged pariah. They were privileged because they had these jobs, but they are pariah, they're hated because they're in the different parts of the country. So you kill them because they had the best jobs. They weren't content to do business. I don't know what they're supposed to do. You can't come into your wall city. They're not content to do business. They wanted to run everything. Guess who's running everything in Nigeria at the moment? Okay. Now, they called us backward because we were Muslims, really. Okay. But we were reading Arabic for centuries while they were still cannibals, really. Okay. Now, these are all the comments when this reporter went around asking, what happened? Can you tell us about these Igbo people? They're pushy. They don't want to do business. They call us backwards. They are cannibals and so kill them. Yeah? Okay, now, if there was a plan to rid of the north of all Igbos, well, Harrison said he has succeeded. More than 1 million Igbos living in the north and in many other parts of the Federation have retreated to the sanctuary of the eastern region. So remember the word, the sanctuary. So eastern region, which later became Biafra, was as a result of all these killings. People retreated into what we call the sanctuary, into their homelands, into their villages, to their hamlets, where their extended families absorbed them. So if you want to talk about Biafra, you cannot but mention this. Yeah, it was a retreat into a sanctuary where you at least, you're not going to be killed the next minute. Okay? There's nowhere else that was safe for you. Okay. Now, in the East, it is widely believed that the pogrom had religious overtones because the Igbos, of course, are Christians. But of the 32 northern soldiers now in detention, so they actually arrested some of the northern soldiers in detention. They had roles in killing. Most of them, they said, were southern half of the region, in other words, the mid-belt, where missionary education was permitted to penetrate. Remember I told you missionary education was not allowed to go into the north because they said we want to rule indirectly. Therefore, we maintain the Muslim way of doing things. Therefore, book is haram. Hence, you have Boko Haram. So therefore, if you learned anything about how you read and write and so on to do the modernity things, it was said to be haram. You're not allowed. So, but in the middle belt, missionary managed to get up there. And therefore, you have people like Gowan, whose father was a priest, and he was able to read and write, and therefore was anyway, and people like him. Now, 11 of those who were captured, who the rioters, they said 11 of them were Catholic, and 10 of them were Protestants, and then 10 were Muslim. So these are the group of soldiers who did the killing. Now, with the Igbos departed, many predicted the North economy would then be paralyzed. So what happened when the Igbos left the North? All this, they had their privileged jobs and so on. Now, this is the situation. The breakdown may yet come, because efficiency has certainly fallen off. So what are the actual Easterners doing in North? Well, there are some doubts that 50 million groundnut crops can be shipped to Lagos for export. There's some doubt about the economy. Now, but the train, now this is what is something I'm telling you the Igbos have been doing. The trains are gradually beginning to run again. When the Igbos left, the trains wasn't running. So they had to get European engineers, to help run the trains. Before that, they didn't need foreigners to run the trains. Unless you see Easterners are foreigners, of course. Now, and the Northern launched 2-month program to train Northern clerks, accountants, adding machine operators. They now have to recruit their own people, force them to learn to do all those things which the Igbos were doing. The telephone still worked, and the mail gets through. Although a letter posted from Lagos may take a week to arrive in Kanu. Let me repeat that. When the Igbos left, the letter you post from Lagos would take you 1 week to arrive in Kanu. It used to take 2 days. So that is the type of efficiency the Easterners were providing to the Nigerian economy. 2 days from Lagos to Kanu, your letter will be in your hand. When they left, it took a week. So Nigeria went backwards when it comes to running its commerce. Now for too long, says Aminu Kanu, one of the politicians, said for too long, we've been letting outsiders do things for us while we sat back relishing our traditions. Now, he says, now we will have only ourselves to blame for not advancing into the 20th century. But we must do it ourselves. So he recognized that there was some issue between them not being in touch with modernity. They now have to wake up and start doing things which the so-called Nyamuris were doing for them. So I parked that one side. So that is the background which I'm trying to bring to you to appreciate what has happened when the Igbos left the northern part of Nigeria at the time, between, October to December. So there's an issue before Biafra is launched, what was happening to Nigeria. So in the north, they have emptied the north of Igbos. In the west, although some stay behind, the majority of them are run back to the east, to this sanctuary we're going to call Biafra. Now, so the same reporter, Garrison, Lloyd Garrison, for New York Times. What did he do? He went to Enugu, the receiving end, where the Igbos are run to, went to know what was happening on that side. He said, after over 1 million Easterners from the north poured into Enugu, this is a report, on the 9th of December 1966. So now, he says, there's an estimated massacre of Igbos in the north, in Kanu, for example, and other parts of Nigeria. New York Times correspondent Lloyd Garrison visited.
All right, Mazi, I need to ask you some questions. As you know, I have to interrupt you now and then. It might look a bit rude, but we have to do that. Listen, Mazi, I am so I don't know how to describe it, because I'm busy listening to you, knowing as a person who was born after the war, this whole thing for me is a nightmare. Now tell me, what is it about our people that we will wait for the last minute till when the knife is on our neck? We will not run for our life. And I mean, it is not just then. Even today, we know that we have millions of our people in the north. And if anything has to happen today, it will be back again to history. Please go ahead.
Okay, to answer that one, you have to also understand the background to how Nigeria was in the 60s. The first, remember, we've been killed in 1945 in Jos. We've been killed in 1953 in Kanu. Okay? Now, this is 66. The strange thing about 66 was the primordial hatred was now unleashed. Is this deep-seated hatred was now industrialized and fanned. The emirs was at it. The soldiers were joining in. The civilians were joining. You can't call it a riot anymore. In fact, it was planned to empty the north of anyone from the east. So that is this now an industrial scale killing. Now, in May, when the first riot was taking place, Major General Aguirre, who's supposed to be an Igbo person, was the one head of government in Nigeria. You agree with that? So he was able to stamp out the May 66 rioting. They actually physically sent troops to go and quell it, and restore peace and order. Ojukwu told those people who managed to escape, it's okay, you can all go back now. There'll be no more killing. This is the last bloodshed we're going to have, so that we will, there'll be peace. His friend, Emir, Bayero Emir, who he made the chancellor of, University of Nigeria and Nsukka, much to the consternation was Nnamdi Azikiwe. Nnamdi Azikiwe helped to form the university. Okay, Ojukwu made a northern emir a chancellor. Okay, at the heat of the 66 when he became the governor. So now this friend of his reassured him that there'd be no more killing. Okay, so people, particularly from Newi, then went back because they listened to Ojukwu. Then went back to the north. Then what happened? They got killed again. Okay, now you can blame them for why did they leave at the last minute? They were reassured in May. Okay, so now because they were reassured in May, they were able to go back. Now, what then happened was there's a chain of events, which one thing when they then killed Aguirre, and this one is the coup which Gowon became the head of. Muritala Muhammad and his gang, they killed Aguirre and started killing all the Igbo officers. So there was no more support to prevent any further killings. So the people living in the north, they have to literally make their way home. Okay? You'll have said, why don't they do it then? But because the coup was aborted, the eastern part, this was a coup which was supposed to take over the whole Nigeria, but the eastern part, Ojukwu was still in charge. He heard there was going to be a coup. He ran into the police station where he stayed and he was guarded. So they did not get at him. They didn't get him to replace him. You remember the Enugu garrison was run by the northern soldiers. Benjamin Adekunle was actually in charge there at the time. So they could have killed Ojukwu, but the coup didn't work. So at that stage then, Ojukwu became the only person who could ask people and protect them. He couldn't protect his people because he can't tell them, stay in the north. Don't come back to east or whatever. So he says, if you can cross this line, if you can come over to the eastern region by whatever means, then you are safe. Going back to this concept of sanctuary. So when they were told to return, every nook and cranny, anyone who can write, say, if you have a relative in the north, you were told, come home. That was one singular information. Come home was the message, and Igbos, they poured home. Okay, so I would agree with you. At the moment in time, we tend to leave things too late, but at the 66 killings, they had no choice. That's why they came home in droves. Okay, so we have to perhaps differentiate that. Now, dial that forward. I believe in the 80s or so, 90s, they were trying to kill the Igbos again, right? So Ojukwu said, look, this time round, we're not running. We're not going to go anywhere. I think I've forgotten what declaration is. Is it the Kanu, Kaduna, or whatever declaration is called? They say if they kill enough, kill them back. Yeah, so he warned the Kanu Emir. When you start killing the Igbos, remember when this time finishes, there'll be nothing left in Kanu. So that's how they backed off. Okay, so they decided we're not running anymore. We're gonna stay there and die and fight with them. So there's a change in the scene for those who feel that we can just go and kill the Igbos anyhow you like.
All right,
Mazi.
All right, not interrupting again, but I need to come in here now. Would it be right if I say that the reason why our people don't want to leave the North, even till today, is because of business interest and wrong investment they made in the wrong place?
Okay, I will answer that. First of all, there's also, in addition to what you said, there's this concept that they have built a house, they have a hotel, and so on. So if you join Biafran struggle, we're going to lose those hotels, we're going to lose those houses.
There we go.
It's an erroneous understanding, because as of now, this very minute, your house, your business, whatever it is you build enough cannot be guaranteed. The only thing that guarantees it is that you have a Biafra as a country, so that if anything happens to you, you be a foreign indigent, they have to compensate you for what you have. At the moment, they feel that, well, we're not going to join this Biafra train because if we do, we lose our investment. It's a wrong thing. Is a wrong thinking. And the second part to that question is, why did they not invest in Biafra land? Because there's nothing there. You don't have the roads. Go to the north and see what the roads are like. You don't have the trains. How many trains do you have in the Biafra land? You have the infrastructure. It's not there, and it's deliberately so that you're forcing them to invest outside Nigeria. So if you change that scenario whereby you quit the East, there'll be no need for them to go and live there and stick their neck out, because they know if you have a beauty contest and a stage in the north, and somebody said, we don't like what's happening, they kill the Igbos. If there's a lunar eclipse somewhere, they turn around and kill the Igbos. If there's a Denmark cartoonist drawing about Muhammad, they turn around and kill the Igbos. So I'm afraid the scenario continues until our people understand that they once upon a time, the killing stopped. Not only when they killed all the Igbos in the north, also when they had a place called Biafra, you have to come and defend and fight your way through every village. And in the end of that fighting, they say no victor, no vanquish. Because unless you have a place you can call your home, you're currently going to be killed like a stray dog, I'm afraid to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please continue uninterruptedly. I think we still have almost half an hour to go again. Take it up.
So the theme I was developing then was the fact that we have now been to the north, we've been kicked out. The report from the garrison, from these garrison guys, this is the background in the north. Things are not running as efficiently as they think they're good at. Yeah? Because the Igbos are providing some important services. The English or the British who appointed them to those posts before independence was because they are the ones who can read and write, who can do the job properly. Okay, the British will not say to you, oh, because you're from a tribe 7, therefore I'm going to appoint you. They say, you are from tribe whatever, you can do the job, I appoint you. So that's one thing that was not made known to those in the north. So they saw those who came from outside as privileged pariahs, as I keep using the term these sociologists use. So I'll now tell you what happened at Enugu. So they are poured into Enugu as the capital or other parts of the eastern region. So this garrison went there to report the events. Now, this is what happened. So he got to a place where they called, where they were settling the refugees. So here is a snippet of what happened. Somebody was lining up and they said, what is your name, sir? Please. They asked the man behind the desk. Yeah? without looking up at the applicant standing before him. So people are returned and they went to an office to register the fact that they're refugees. Is there any job for them? So this is an important part of why Biafra came. These are refugees that need to be rehabilitated. There are over 2 million. If remember the Rohingyas scenario, they left where they were and the whole world knew that there was a crisis. Anywhere where you have a flock of people pouring into one part, be it people leaving Syria, people leaving Afghanistan, doesn't matter where they are, when they arrive at the other destination, they become refugees. But when this happened to the Easterners, they poured into the Eastern region, and somehow there was no external help. Even their own government, who's supposed to help them, turned their back. And this is what led to Biafra being established. I'll come back to this theme. So, Garrison therefore visited what was like a center where these people have been processed. Yeah? So, he said, what's your name? So, my name is Sunday Ofokaja. Ofokaja. I'm not sure I pronounced it properly. Ofokaja. Yeah, Ofokaja. So, age 41. Occupation, certified public accountant. Sign the card here and print your name and address under the signature, said the man. Fine. Next. So they were being processed. It's not a laughing matter. There are people in the queue. They were being processed. You're an accountant. You're a mechanic. You're this. We have to try and find a job for you now in the Eastern region. Okay? So there was people who were destitute. Remember, this is December. Christmas is coming. The school fees haven't been paid. The children, some have escaped, some have, and so on and so forth. Now, so this reporter was reporting the scenario in the Eastern region, the crisis on one of the towns. So it was such an abrupt ritual that the accountant had no time to say more, to pour out his desperation, to tell how he lost everything in Kanu, his job at the bank, his car, his TV set. And say that this was, and then say all he had was his lucky escape with his life. Without a word, this Sunday guy turned and left, passing a long line of refugees that stretched along the corridor down the steps of the Eastern Region Refugee Commission headquarters here in Enugu, which is the region capital. The accountant was one of slightly more than 1 million Easterners, most of them Igbos, who fled to their Eastern region homeland after the September massacre of Easterners living in Northern region. The commission here is well staffed and is working overtime to settle the refugees. But it is an awesome undertaking. So far, the Eastern region government has earmarked £2.8 million equivalent for rehabilitation. Meaning it's okay. They said $2.8 million because they're writing in the American newspaper, New York Times. They said as equivalent of $2.8 million for the rehab. And then the federal government in Lagos is supposed to contribute $980,000. Now, nearly half of this total is going to pay the salaries of hundreds of civil servants who retreated here from all parts of the Federation and who had been absorbed by putting them on the regional government payroll. So the scenario was you worked for the government, but you are now left Kanu, you left Kaduna, you run away, and no one is paying your salary. So you have to be absorbed by the Eastern region government. Okay, bear that in mind. I'll visit this later. Now, the bulk of the rest of the money, which is more than 600,000, is being invested in new farm cooperatives to increase the food production and provide new job opportunities. But we are already encountering some difficulty with all the farm schemes and so on. So I will spare you reading the whole story if you get a chance to study it. What it is that the government was trying its best to rehabilitate these people who have then left in a hurry. Their television, their cars, their jobs not being paid, and so on. Someone had to somehow carry this burden. In the tradition, be an African tradition, an Igbo tradition, Someone comes from somewhere. So you have to rely on your extended family to support you. If it wasn't for the extended family system, it would have been impossible to reabsorb 2 million people, which is 17% of the population at the time in the eastern region. Okay? So that was the background then when all the killings was going on in the north, and we now have eastern region as a sanctuary. Okay, if I just use that term for now. We're now talking December. So what was going on? Well, I tell you, there was a song, okay, because every single village or town that you go to, if your relative didn't come back from Lagos or from Kanu, from Zaria, from Kaduna, from Maiduguri, from Sokoto, you have a story to tell. I said last time, some people were cut in pieces that they weren't even culturally allowed to be buried in their own compound. So the scenario in the eastern region in the December of 1966 was very, very grim indeed. And artists, these musicians, they always sing about what they're seeing in front of them. So there's a song by Rex Lawson that goes something like this. Onwuzuruwa, yeah? Onwuzuruwe. Let me just force myself to sing it. Onwuzuruwe. Mashingi arawanne. Ashingi arawanne. Onarima. He played it over and over and over again. It was the mood, it's a somber music. Everybody heard it. And they were just playing it over and over because Onwuzuruwa means there's death everywhere. There's nowhere on the planet where you don't have any death. So it's like a balm to try and cushion the impact, the people, the suffering, just to dampen them down. Okay? But, human beings, we're not satisfied. The Igbos, on the other hand, the people who were in the eastern region, they felt they needed the vengeance. It's like when you send the Abriba warriors to go across the north and kill as many northerners as possible. Yeah? So there was some areas where, indeed, the northerners were attacked. But the Juku said, you mustn't do this. No way. He wasn't going to have it. So you needed some strong leadership at that time. Otherwise, you would have internal killings everywhere. So Juku forced them to remain calm. And in fact, he went and rounded the northerners and spoke to them in the Hausa language, asked them to pack their things, and they would be escorted. Can you believe that? They had the soldiers, the army, to escort them out to the east. Some took the flight, some were taken across to the Niger border, they went to go via Lagos area. So they were escorted out of the east by the forces in the east, so that they would be immune or protected from what the general public were seeing. Okay, so it took strong leadership to be able to dampen the anger that was welling in the eastern region. Okay, so this was around December. Okay, so this is before Ojukwu then had to go to Aburi, because at this stage we say we've been chased out of Nigeria. Okay, one who is rejected by others cannot reject himself. It's time for us to go. We're going to lose a lot, but it's time for us to go. And this is what Ojukwu has to tell them. He has to provide strong leadership. We're talking a 32, 33-year-old man as the head of state. Can you imagine? Okay, he said, of all the things that we suffered, this is a quote I got from 1966. Indeed, he said, we are braced to face and encounter the challenge of the future. We believe that the tomorrow we face, or the battle for survival, will not be won by bullets or savagery, but by brain power, modern skills, and the determination to live and succeed. We also believe that out of the carnage and wrecks of the past will emerge a new breed of men and women who are resolute, powerful, and prosperous. That's Lieutenant Colonel C. Odime Ojukwu, 1966. Biafra hasn't been declared, but he has to calm his people. He has to tame them. He has to tell them, let's look not for revenge, but to build a new country, build a new path to survive as a people. Okay? That is what we mean by strong leadership. And he had a class 1966, class 1970 to thank for. They were really, really up for it. Okay. Sorry, you were going to say something?
No, not at all. Go ahead. I'm listening.
Okay, so what I said, therefore, we needed strong leadership. At that time, otherwise Nigeria would just flare up. Everybody just go take the knife and go to the north and start killing for what has happened to their own people. So he managed to contain it. As you know, Ojukwu, when he came back from exile, he was called Eze Bulubulu Igbo. Is that right? Eze Ndibo Bulubulu. And he says, Onu Nekuru Orama. Now is the mouthpiece for his people. So he stepped in the gap. We've never seen such a leader. He came in to dampen the pain of his people. And then he was told that we should, why are we still in Nigeria? He took one extra step called the Aburi. Yeah? He has to go that extra mile. And this is very important. As I said last time, the killing started in May. It was in May the year after, 1 year before Biafra was declared. Biafra, as you've been to understand now, is like a sanctuary. We can't go back to Nigeria to kill us. If we stay here, well, we have to build a new system. But we built Nigeria. But we have to now build. Remember the trains? Remember the newspaper? Remember the post office running efficiently from Lagos to Kaduna or to Kanu in 2 days. When we left, it take off the 1 week, if at all it gets there. Okay? So the efficiency with which Nigeria was run, thanks to those people, has now been kicked out, and nobody cared. Right. Now, so that's against the background to which we are now going to find a solution to all these killings. And that is why Aburi was called. Why Aburi? Well, Aburi was because the last time they had a conference when Gowon became the head of state, or they took over the government, there was a conference going on, and while the conference was going on, the killing resumed in the north. So Gowon wasn't actually stopping anybody being killed. In the end, he got exasperated and said, for God's sake, the killing has to stop. Enough bloodshed. Enough. So, but from July, August, September, October, people were being killed. He did nothing as the head of state. Okay? So, he made fancy speeches. God has made it possible for the Northerners to become the head of state again. Da-da-da-da-da-da. He wasn't really doing anything to stem the bloodshed. But, so, we got to December. We now got to find a solution to all this goings on. So that is why Aburi was an important meeting. The Aburi meeting, I bring the British in a bit. The Brits were looking for where we're going to have this conference. If Ojukwu went back to Lagos, they'll arrest him. They'll kill him. If he went to the north, he'll not be safe to come back. So he says there's nowhere in Nigeria where we can sit down and have this meeting. That's how bad things were. And of course, Nigerians had to come back and say, well, we can't trust that Gowon will come to the east and be safe either, which may well be true. So they cannot have the meeting about the future security of the country within the same country. So that's how bad things were. The British stepped in. Oh, why don't we have this meeting at the British warship parked outside the shores of Nigeria in Lagos? So, any scholars, history scholars here? Why that would not be a good idea? British government was offering them to have this conference in a British warship off the coast of Nigeria. And of course, Ojukwu did history in Oxford. I think you will have come across the history of Jaja of Opobo. Jaja of Opobo, as you all know, was trading independently and competing with the British under Victorian rule. So they said, let's have a conference in our boat parked outside Opobo. So he by the way, when you come, don't bring your army. It's okay. So he turned up for this a gentleman's meeting. They kidnapped him, extraordinary renditioned him to West Indian island, and on his way back he died. So Ojukwu remember the history. So you can't go and have a meeting in the British boat. So he has got an antecedent to follow. So therefore he said, no, I'm not going to a British warship to discuss what's happening. So this is where the Ghanaians stepped in. General Ankara, who took over from Nkrumah, decided, let's have this meeting in Ghana, a neutral ground. Ojukwu flies straight to Ghana, and the Nigerian delegate would go to Ghana, and they will meet at the conference place. So, 4th and 5th of January 1967. So we survived 66 with a lot of wound for the people of the Eastern region. We now need to find a solution. So they went to Aburi on 4th January and 5th of January to discuss how are we going to live together, okay, in one country. What is the way forward? So they met in Aburi. I'll say to you, after the war, Gowon said, there are no victors, no vanquished. Is that not so? And we have 3 R's. Yeah? Reconstruction, reconciliation, and rehabilitation. Yeah? Great. Okay. All sounds very good, but if you study it, there are 2 cons in that 3 R's. Anyway, we'll come back to that. The Aburi Accord had actually 6 R's, what I call 6 R's. After the war, you have 3 R's. What I'll say to you, if we have carried out the Aburi Accord, the 6 R's, there'll have been no need for the 3 R's, which was a sham anyway. Okay. The first R of the Aburi Accord was the renunciation, okay, of the use of force to settle Nigerian crises. That's the first R. Yeah? We are not going to use military force or any other force to sort out Nigerian internal problem. Renunciation of force was number 1. They agreed to that. The second R was reorganization of the army. Why do we need to reorganize the army? Well, we have the Northern Army going around killing people who are not of Eastern origin, and nowhere else is safe in Nigeria. So the army needs to be reorganized. Who army have you got? Is it Northern Army? Is it a Nigerian army? Is it Yoruba army? Or is it Eastern army? So the army needs to be reorganized, and they need to stay in their own station, their own regions. Because if you're an army officer of Eastern origin and you go to the north, you may not come back, and vice versa. So the army needs to be reorganized. That's the second R. The third R is what they call the regional autonomy. Yeah, you have to return to the regions, because the whole rioting, they say, UNC brought Decree 34 and tried to force everybody into becoming one country instead of their regions. We want to have our regions. So all the decree, when the military came in 1966, was rescinded, and they returned to regional autonomy. That's R number 3. R number 4, now, I mentioned to you, those people lining up in Enugu, trying to find a means of living again, we call rehabilitation of the Eastern refugees. You need to rehabilitate them. You need to pay their salary. You need to remember this area, this region now needs support from the center. You need to rehabilitate those who have been killed. We aren't even talking compensation yet. Just get them employed. Get their means of livelihood going again. We need to rehabilitate them. Don't wait till you finish killing them in the war and start rehabilitating them. You can do it now. Okay? So that's the 4th R. The 5th R is what they call revenue reallocation for financial secretaries. They were supposed to meet, and their revenue reallocation was to be formalized. Yeah, they're supposed to do revenue reallocation. Okay? So at the moment, Zamfara, we have gold, and we're not bringing it to the center. And the riverine area, we say this oil belongs to us. We want to. So the formula for sharing what you have was discussed in Aburi. That's R number 5. R number 6. Let me explain this one. they wanted the actual recording, this particular peace talk, they wanted it to be handed over to the OAU, Organization of African Unity, what they call Adi Amama, as a guarantee that we have had a chat. This is what we discussed, just in case other countries don't know what happened. So Ojukwu brought this idea. They said, no, we are brothers. No. This is an internal matter. We will deal with it. No, we're not going to go to OAU and hand over what we discussed. So this R number 6 was not agreed upon. But every other R, 5 out of 6, as I mentioned to you, the renunciation of use of force, the reorganization of the army, the return of regional autonomy, the rehabilitation of Eastern refugees, the revenue allocation, all these were agreed upon. Okay? And something about if you're going to have a decision, it has to have concurrence of all the various regions, because they now have regional commanders. Everything was formularized, and so those are the principles on which Aburi was based on. So Ojukwu didn't get the 6 out of the 6 R's, the one where you report all the findings and deposit it in OAU. They turned it down. But nevertheless, the whole conference was recorded in a gramophone long play LP, so that it is possible to play it, so nobody will say, this is not what we said. And at the end, they all have to read the transcript, and they all have to sign it in front of General Ankara. General Ankara read it and said, anyone want to amend anything? They said no. And they signed it. And if you look at the pictures, Ojukwu and Gowon was eating from the same plate, a bone of rice, if I recall, and some meat in it. None of them was using a long spoon, okay? They were eating as brothers. Everybody agreed. The Aburi Accord was very, very successful. So on the 5th of January, they all left Ghana. Everybody breathed a huge sigh of relief. Whew, we can carry on again as a family. Then the problem started. The problem started because when Gowon got back, the permanent secretary started saying, did you know what you signed? Do you know you signed away Nigeria? Really? We're going to be a confederacy. What's that? Well, Ojukwu have confused you people. You know, he went to Oxford. Very, very sad. And maybe I'm over dramatizing this. This is very serious. The highest authority in the country went and had a conference. They signed a form, which they should abide by, and then one side decided not to agree with it any longer. This is where Nigeria was destroyed. Okay? So not only were the Easterners kicked out of the Federation, they tried to come back in a way that will accommodate everybody. Okay? And this was turned down. Gowon, instead of announcing, this is what we have done, this is announcing to the nation, this is what we agreed at Aburi, this is what we're supposed to do, he decided, maybe I gave away so much. So what exactly did you give away? Yeah? What did you give away? Yeah? Did you give away the fact that renunciation of force as a way of solving the problem is not a good idea? Is that what you gave away? What about reorganizing of the army? What have we got now? We've got Boko Haram in the army. Yeah? So-called repentant Boko Haram in the army. The Nigerian army, who are they protecting? The army is not reorganized. If it was reorganized in 66 or 67, we wouldn't have this mess. We would have an army which is neutral and able to respond to any threat to the nation. What about regional autonomy? Well, that's what we are vying for now. Everybody wants to have their own autonomy. If this region wants to do this region, that is what is happening now. How about rehabilitation of refugees? You now have, because you didn't do this to the Eastern refugees, you now have internally displaced refugees in the north, more than, I dare say, than they had in the eastern region before the war started. So failure to rehabilitate the eastern refugees have left you with more internally displaced human beings in the Nigerian than they had. So another failure. Okay, revenue allocation. Well, Zamfara will discover gold and will not bring it to the center. And those who have oil bring it to the center. And how long when this run out? Nobody wants to contribute. Everyone wants to take from the center and not allocate accordingly. Okay? So there are issues then as a result of the failure to carry out the 5 R's on Aburi Accord. You ended up with a war, okay, because renunciation of the use of force was abandoned, and you used force to force people back in to the country. So that's a failure number 1. Because of that, renunciation of force was not applied. Officers and gentlemen, you ended up asking for 3 R's. You ended up having to reconstruct areas where you destroyed in your 3 R's. You have to reconcile with the enemy. Yeah, your brothers and sisters supposed to have been in the same country. You need to reconcile them. And then you have to do rehabilitation. We should have used the funds to rehabilitate those refugees in the first place. But the rehabilitation, which you did after the war, was a joke. Because rehabilitation or reconstruction started in Festac town in Lagos. You built a brand new stadium, and then you carried on. It's not coming to the east. You moved it to build a brand new capital in Abuja. So the area where you had the war, you just ignored it. So there's a lot to learn from Nigerian history about what happened at Aburi. And they're still thinking about it. The failure to implement Aburi is what led very, very rapidly to the nosedive that created Biafra.
All right,
this is where we headed in the first place. So January came.
Mazi, can you hear me?
Everybody, Ojukwu got back and celebrated. Aburi was a success because you remember he was being told, "Don't go because there's nothing to. We can't trust these people any longer." You told us to go back when they killed us in May. They didn't. They carried on killing us. Now Aburi, you brought Aburi. What do you think will happen if Aburi is jettisoned? Do you think Ojukwu will ever be trusted again? Okay, so
all right, Aburi, Mazi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to give you a 5 minutes break, and we'll take a break this side. I mean, you've been talking for more than an hour, and that's not an easy, it's an act. So I want you to get some water, and we will come back in the next 5 minutes, and then, of course, you will start wrapping up. I feel like you can talk the whole day today. That's the mood I am in. But I'm willing to give you even another 15 more minutes. But let's take a 5 minutes break, and we'll be back. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, we will take a quick break and we will be back. We are talking Biafran History 101, Part 4. And with me, of course, is Dr. Okachi Lewis, all the way from the United Kingdom, telling us our history. Bob Marley said, if you don't know your history, then you're lost. You will not know where you're coming from. And also an Igbo adage says, and I quote, and this is Constructive Argument with Mazi Ikechukwu on Radio Biafra.
This is Constructive Argument on Radio Biafra with Mazi Ikechukwu. Bring your argument, and we've got the solution. Constructive Argument. We hit below the belt. Radio Biafra. We've got you covered. This is Constructive Argument on Radio Biafra with Mazi Ikechukwu. Bring your argument, and we've got the solution. Constructive Argument. We hit below the belt. Radio Biafra. We've got you covered.
Biafra History 101. Now, this is a live program for those of you who might think it's a recorded. It is live, it is direct. I've got my pen, my paper ready, and I'm learning, and I hope you are. Let's go back to Dr. Lois Okachi. Mazi, can you hear me? If you can, please take it away, and I will give you 15 more minutes to the top of the hour, and we will call it a day. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, and the whole world is listening. Let's do this.
Okay, so we just quickly remind ourselves, we just talked about Ojukwu going to Aburi as the last resort, and his people are waiting with bated breath to see whether that will help them survive the killings they endured. So Aburi was hailed by those who were there, including by the Ghana head of state, as a success. It was done behind closed doors without any outside interference. But when they got back, those who were supposed to take the decision as the Supreme Military Council, who were the highest authority in the land, somehow decided to backtrack. They said, what we signed is not really in the best interest of the nation. I'm not sure which of those R's they want to change. So January came, Ojukwu announced that on Aburi we stand. Aburi is something his people hope will allow them to have some catch their breath from all the killing. But even then, remember what I said, he told them in May to go back, everything will be okay, they got killed. Some who stayed got killed, so there's nowhere safe. They went to Aburi as a last resort. Now, instead of implementing Aburi Accord, they're now dragging their feet. They're going back. So January came, the 4th and 5th, after the conference, nothing was implemented. They started leaking some of the information from Aburi, which wasn't accurate. The Ojukwu had to counter it by releasing the gramophone play of what the conference was. And of course, if you're trying to fool the Igbo people, you just ask to hear what one person have said. They want to hear the other side. So they have listened to the Aburi Accord on the long gramophone play, and they printed a shirt on Aburi We Stand. Yeah, that's really it. The Ojukwu also made it stand on Aburi We Stand. So they printed a T-shirt on Aburi We Stand. So that started selling a hot cake. But what was happening is, as January rolled into February, there was a suspicion that Gowon was not going to carry out the implementation of Aburi. It's really a kick in the teeth. So there was, if you like, it's always good to look at outsiders' recording, not Eastern region or a Biafran person, an Igbo person. New York Times stepped in on the March 8th, 1967. They reported that Ojukwu has addressed the press meeting, about the increasing difficulty the Eastern region was having with Lieutenant Colonel Gowon, who was the federal government. Referring to the differences, he said, Ojukwu said, I cannot see us bridging seeing them bridged, the differences between the Lagos government and the Eastern government, because they're not implementing what we said. Okay, it's now 2 months. Remember, it happened in January. 2 months since the Aburi Accord, the government therefore moved, concerned about the deteriorating situation. So it was the Ghanaian government was now really getting concerned. So what was happening was that after that meeting, and implementation was not going on, so Ojukwu started stating that, look, if you're not going to carry out all that we have said, okay, it is going to be necessary for us to take alternate measures to safeguard the security and safety of our people. So when he said something like that, it became like a warning shot to Gowon. So Gowon was saying, hang on, we're going to resist any invasion. We're going to resist any secession. But no one is threatening secession. Ojukwu was saying to him, we have a problem. The people who have run away from the north, from other parts, need to be rehabilitated. You're not doing anything about it. And it's part and parcel of the agreement. So they say, well, East, if the East secede, this and that and that. So you could say the East is not going to secede, but we'll see if attacked, of course, we will defend ourselves. These are the conditions for East seceding. East will secede if there's a blockade, okay, and if physically attacked, we have every right to defend ourselves. So that is what was happening now. We're heading to tension between the Nigerian Lagos government and the Eastern region government. And I explained to you what that means. Ojukwu said in February that if by the end of March 31st, the Gowon has not started paying some money towards the rehabilitation of all these people and implement their Buri Accord, then he, Ojukwu, will have to do something to secure his people. Okay? So, they announced that on the 31st of March, there's something called Survival Edict. Survival Edict is an important thing to understand. It means that every tax collected in the Eastern region, right, instead of paying it to Lagos, you now paid that tax to the Eastern Nigerian government, which are going to use to pay for rehabilitating people where you have extra places in schools, extra hospital requirement, all the infrastructure you need to do for the 2 million that poured into that part of the country. So it's a 6-page edict directing all federal tax collectors in the East to pay the revenues direct to the Eastern region. Gowon went berserk. So you can't do that. He blockaded the Eastern region. He sent a gunboat to blockade them so they can't transmit anything outside. They can't trade with anybody. So Ojukwu said, hang on, there are 2 ways of killing somebody. If you shoot at them, I forgot the exact quote. So if you shoot somebody, you'll be accused of murder, yes? Also, if you strangle them, you'll also be accused of murder, yes? So it says the East will secede if attacked. A physical attack, which is or an economic blockade. He said, we all know when you pick up a pistol and shoot a man, it is called murder. And equally so when you strangle him. So what Ojukwu is saying is that if you're going to strangle our trade, yeah, so that we can trade, then we're not going to be able to survive as an entity. And I can tell you for free, before the war started, commodities like salt immediately started becoming expensive. So we're already on an economic blockade before the war started. People don't know this. So Nigeria imposed a blockade in the East because Ojukwu was saying, I'm going to collect the tax in the East. I'm not going to send it to Lagos because they're not using it to help rehabilitate these people who are desperately in need of rehabilitation. So the whole thing was, if you like, it was spreading in the media. So much so, there's something called the liaison officer in international post. Every region in those days, be it North, Midwest, West, and East, you had a representative office in Washington, in America, in London. In other words, it's like your own mini embassy. So the Biafran or the Eastern region's liaison officer had to take an advert on the newspaper in the New York Times to explain the Eastern side of what was happening. Because the Americans were now accusing the Eastern region, oh, you're about to secede. You're about to secede. What is going on here? So I read you the letter in the New York Times from someone who is the liaison officer.
All right, Mazi, we need to start wrapping it up. Our time is up, and of course, next week we start the part 5. Please go ahead and round up. Thank you very much.
So this letter will help us to understand the East's position before Biafra was declared. He wrote a letter. So in a letter to the editor of the New York Times, the Eastern Region Nigeria Liaison Officer, Mr. Oji, explained his position. This is the summary of where we are before Biafra was declared. He said, Eastern Nigeria appreciates your concern over the crisis in our country. To eliminate possible misunderstanding, however, may I comment on 2 points. Your March 11th editorial referred to me as an Eastern Nigerian who represents himself as liaison officer in the United States for Ojukwu's regime. So they already started calling him a regime. I am not here for self-appointment. For 4 years, I served as consul, commercial, for the Nigerian Consul General in New York. As a Nigerian of Eastern origin, I was recently forced out of that position. He's already been kicked out as a Nigerian. Okay? Now he's representing the Eastern region. The Eastern region therefore gave me a current post. Each of the 4 regions in Nigeria had the privilege of representing abroad or promote trade and investment. Eastern Nigeria has had a representative in New York and London intermittently during the last few years. This is no different in the recent opening in New York. My office is properly registered. It is free world. We are entitled to provide information of concern and interest to the American people to make known our point of view. Here we go. A picture captioned March 10th said that Colonel Ojukwu, the military governor of Eastern Nigeria, is leading a secessionist movement. Colonel Ojukwu is not leading a secessionist movement. He is attempting to lead the people of this region out of an untenable position forced on them by northern-dominated federal government. Some 30,000 Nigerians of Eastern origin were killed in the north during 1966. Some 2 million Eastern Nigerians were forced to flee other sections of the country and seek safety and protection in their home region. There is little understanding of the awesome burden placed on the Eastern region to provide housing, jobs, security for these people, whose presence has expanded the population by 17%. And there is little understanding of the indifference of the federal government to their problem. The situation demands a reallocation of revenues between the regions and the federal government. Accordingly, Colonel Ojukwu and his government of the region met in Aburi, Ghana in January, negotiated agreement which, among other things, provide for a study of revenue to reallocation of the finance secretaries of the region and the federal government. The Eastern region has been calling for such meeting of the finance secretaries, but the federal government have not acted. Only the implementation of the Aburi Agreement can save the Nigerian Federation. This is the fight Colonel Ojukwu is leading, not a secessionist movement. So that was the, if you like, the situation where we are at the moment. Because of the reneging of the signing at Aburi, Nigeria faced a situation where the East had to decide what to do next. Okay? So the next time we talk about it is the declaration of Biafra. I think I've been able to lay bare where we started and how we got to where we are. So whereby Colonel Ojukwu at that time, then known, and Gowon were not singing from the same hymn sheet any longer. They were no longer compatible because Ojukwu was saying one thing, Gowon was insisting on certain things being done. And as a result, Ojukwu was going to ask the representative of Eastern Nigeria to tell him what to do. So they called the chiefs and elders, 300 of them turned up, and they voted with their feet that we have been kicked out of Nigeria. Let's go it alone and declare Biafra. So he got the mandate, and Biafra was declared. Nigeria invaded on the 6th of July 1967, and you have Biafra, Nigeria war. Thank you very much for listening.
Stunning. Awesome. All right. Next week, Friday, if God permits, and of course, if your time permits, we're looking at part 5. So what should we be expecting, Biafran History part 5?
I will think about it. It will be the declaration of Biafra.
Absolutely. All right.
And why Biafra was declared. I've given you all it's purely for security. It's a safe haven from all the killings. And then, but we haven't declared that you then have to defend your right. And that's what happened. And from there, we lead to humanitarian crises that made Biafra a conscience of the world.
Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate your time once again. And of course, if God's saving us and sparing us, we're looking forward to part 5 next week. Thank you, and God bless.
Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right. That was Dr. Justice Okachi Lois, of course, giving us History 101, Biafran History Part 4. And we are looking for Part 5. This is going to be an archive because our children must know. They must learn. He was talking about Kanjidan. Can you believe when I was in primary school, they were shoving down this Kanjidan in my mouth, telling me about Kanjidan. I have no clue what the hell is Kanji. And today, there we go. But nobody was telling me about Aburi. Nobody was telling me about the killings in Kanu Airport. Nobody was telling me everything about us. But today, it has been laid bare in the open, and we know who we are. And of course, we must restore Biafra. All right, that has been Constructive Argument on Radio Biafra with Mazi Ikechukwu. Of course, led and read by Dr. Justice Okachi Lois.
This is Constructive Argument on Radio Biafra with Mazi Ikechukwu. Bring your argument, and we've got the solution. Constructive Argument. We hit below the belt. Radio Biafra. We've got you covered.
All right, thank you very much, great Biafrans. And of course, this is where we are going to leave it tonight. It has been indeed an intriguing one. It has been a beautiful one indeed. And I thank our brother, Dr. Justice, for giving us this in-depth history. My goodness me, I've never heard it this good before. And of course, we are going to leave it here, and if God's sparing us next week, we will be back again. And of course, I want to close with this. Wherever you see Oji, Alhaji, Oji Okalo, and his co-conspirators, treat them as a non-grata in Biafra land. They have been officially declared an enemy of Biafran people. So you know what to do. Do the needful. All right. Goodbye. And may God bless Biafra. From me, from here, it is goodbye.
Radio Biafra. We saturate the whole of Biafra land. Wherever you are, just touch the dial 102.1 FM. Olu, Owerri, Enugu, Anambra, Abakaliki, Nsukka, Asaba, and many more. Radio Biafra, we got you covered. Radio Biafra, the first and the last. '67 was the year, a year not to be forgotten in the history of mankind, a year of massacre, mass murder, genocide against the defenseless people of Biafra, men, women, and children, while the whole world watched and get entertained with the precious blood of Biafra spilled. The world watched and did nothing. But there was a voice in the wilderness, the voice of Okokondem screaming, Omo Biafra, muru n'anya, onye ndiro gbara gburugburu na-eche ndụ ya nche. The voice of Radio Biafra, the voice of the voiceless, the voice of freedom. 55 years later, Radio Biafra is still defending humanity, bringing you news, information, analysis, revealing and exposing the kingdom of darkness called the Zoo Nigeria, saturating humanity with melody, music. Radio Biafra, we will never stop until Biafra is restored and beyond Biafra restoration. Do you know why? Radio Biafra, the first, and we are the last.
So we have a very, very, very special guest with us today, Dr. Uju Anya, and she is a professor at Carnegie Mellon University in Applied Linguistics.
Yeah.
And so welcome. So I had two more questions, and I want to open it up. Has this experience changed the way? Because, like you said, you kind of go in, you use Twitter. You kind of almost like prepare, like you said, to teach when you go in there. Has this experience changed the way you're looking at engaging in social media, or do you intend to continue to engage in the way you have?
So even in this, my most intense moment on social media, fundamentally, more than I am anything else in this world, more than I am a mother, more than I am a researcher, more than I am a sister, a community member. I am a teacher. And if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to teach.
Right.
And even in that very intense moment of profound pain and my outburst, my emotional outburst of deep, deep pain, I was teaching. I followed up explaining that there was a genocide against the Biafra people.
Right.
Right. Who were trying, the Igbo people who were trying to form an independent nation of Biafra. They wanted to be separate from the country that the British Empire had imposed on us, which was this country of Nigeria, where they kind of took a bunch of independent nations who don't have anything to do with each other, don't even speak each other's language, don't relate. Many of them were even enemies and warring at the time, smushed them all together and drew these arbitrary lines around them and called them countries and named those countries.
Right.
And then said, now y'all get along and do a country for us and be a union for us. And then go through, contentious, bloody independence processes that never really yield any real independence. You're still part of a commonwealth afterwards.
True.
And you have the eternal meddling in your affairs and the eternal extraction of your resources and the eternal fomenting of divisiveness and infighting in order to be able to control you. This is what an oppressor does, a colonizer does. These are tactics and strategies of dominance.
Right.
We were subjected to that as a larger unit of Nigeria. And then when the Igbo people said, we want our own thing, let's go and do that. Well, it so happened to be that the territory that this new country of Biafra was going to be in included very, very rich oil reserves. And the British were not going to let go of that.
Wow.
And the people that they had put in power, their puppet Nigerian governments weren't going to do that either because they needed it for the Nigerian project.
Right.
And Britain needed it for its own interests and uses. So Great Britain got directly involved in this civil war and in the war for independence and decided that they would do everything to make sure that Biafra did not go.
Wow.
And this everything meant directly funding genocide of the people of Biafra. This is what happened. This is the historical record. I'm not saying anything that's in doubt or in question, right?
Yeah.
Even when it was happening during this period of 1967 to 1970, the BBC themselves were producing documentaries decrying it, covering all the protests that were happening in Great Britain.
This is recent.
Yeah, this is very recent. My sister, for example, is turning 60 this month. And my sister was alive at that time. She was like 5, 6.
Right.
My other brother was alive at the time, and my second brother was in my mother's belly. She was pregnant during this time, running from village to village to escape the bombs that they were throwing at villagers. So when we tell you that 3 million people, some people have said up to 5 million, 6 million, or some people quote low. So the sort of average agreed upon number that you really cannot contest is about 3 million. When you think of a Holocaust,
right,
this is a Holocaust.
Absolutely.
Now, the Holocaust that we typically were most familiar with is the most famous one against the Jewish people.
Yes.
Where they, 6 million of them were massacred.
Absolutely.
So at the most sort of conservative estimation, they did half of us.
Right.
Half that number. Civilians. These are non-combatants. And more than 1 million children alone starved.
Wow.
The British paid for that. And Queen Elizabeth II was ruler. She was monarch at that time. This was the government that she was supervising. Now, I don't buy this notion that she was just a statue, if you will.
I was going to ask you that question.
Or a decorative plant.
Right.
Or, some kind of, tchotchke sitting on the shelf.
Right.
This was a ruler. This was someone, the very crown that she had on her head, signifying the fact that she's a monarch, was made from plunder.
Right.
Diamonds, blood diamonds.
Absolutely.
So the throne that she's sitting on is a throne of blood. So you cannot say that she was just this little old lady or this figurehead that really had nothing to do with anything, and it was just the British government that were making their deals and, governing however they would, without relating it directly to her, because she directly benefited her very position as a monarch. The palace that she lived in, the opulence, the obscene levels of wealth that she enjoyed.
Absolutely.
Were all paid for by our blood. And I don't say this figuratively. Right. And I don't say this as something that, this long remote past, let's say, of human enslavement, which on my mother's side, she's from Trinidad, my ancestors over there were enslaved by the British. I'm talking about recent living memory of people still alive today. Her money, her government funded our slaughter. And people expected me to be calm or to be, I don't know what they expected.
Right.
When the person who literally paid money for bombs and guns and military supplies to come and massacre your people is dying. Right. You're not supposed to dance. What's the reaction to that?
I remember when we found out that Osama bin Laden was killed, and Americans celebrated, right? Because they held him responsible for 9/11, which just passed, and that terror that occurred, and those 3,000 or so people that died.
Yeah.
And it's like, but when it's our terror, when it's our pain, when it's our loss as Black and brown people, and we, particularly when we express it in a way that challenges, white supremacy, the white supremacy dominant narrative, and this, kind of almost like Disneying idea that people had of a queen, then all of a sudden it's like we're always told to be civil, to be calm, to be peaceful as Black and brown people. And so, but when it's somebody that you feel harmed America, you can dance, you can celebrate, you can take out your flags, and that's held up. You can have lynchings were celebratory things in the history of the United States of America, where they would have a parade and party and
take children.
Question before we close out, because I saw in the wake of Queen Elizabeth's passing and this conversation around colonialism, a call for reparations, right? I think Jamaicans were saying, like, instead of having more, like, we need reparations.
Absolutely.
You spoke, you taught us about this very recent history around Biafra. Is there a movement or calls for some type of reparation? Because, we've seen reparations happen with the Holocaust of Jewish people. Absolutely. Deservedly so. You mentioned, I'm part of the National African Americans Reparation Commission that was started by Dr. Ron Daniels.
Absolutely. First of all, the Queen never once apologized. She never once opened her mouth to say sorry. Everybody, the history records know what happened and what was done in her name and for her crown. Not just to the people of Biafra, but you talked about the Kenyans, the Indians, the indigenous people, right? Native Americans. So it's just never once have they taken responsibility and just said sorry. So what I am advocating for, and what a lot of people are advocating for, number one is to just recognize what you did and say sorry. And then we can move on to conversations about what does reparations look like. It could look like leaving the oil alone.
Right.
It could look like, actual payments and repayments, of the compensating the 3 million lives that were lost.
Right.
I don't know. We haven't even gotten that far yet because we can't even get them to admit the shit they did.
Wow. Man.
And how does that feel as a language professor to know it's so like, you know, it could all be so simple.
Yeah.
And then just that refusal.
They continue to dehumanize us. That's what it feels like. We are not even human enough to them to sit down with them as equals and say, this is what you did to us. And they recognize it and say, yes, this is what we did. And we're sorry. Even though it's open record, the fact that they never open their mouth and sit down with us and say it shows that they continue to view us as less than and undeserving of the common acknowledgement of our humanity and our dignity to say, yes, we harmed you and we're sorry.
Powerful, a powerful way to end,
and that's why we call it This Week in White Supremacy.
Absolutely,
yes.
This is a perfect synopsis of the theme of this show. And
the article we're going to share as our white pages is a recent article. Dr. Anya just wrote Critical Race Pedagogy for More Effective and Inclusive World Language Teaching. Asking folks to, you said you liberated this article from behind.
I did. It was behind a paywall, and I used money from my research funds to pay the publisher to not put a paywall on it, because I believe that the teachers that I work for and I write for, who benefit from my work and who I also benefit from the work they're doing because they provide me with material for scholarship and investigation. I believe that they should have free access to the results of the work I do for them and with them.
Well, we greatly appreciate you doing that and appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy. I know you've been kind of bombarded with media requests that you would take the time to come and sit with us and be so passionate, so vulnerable, and so open about his journey. And we're thankful to have this relationship with you now and looking forward to continue to support the incredible work that you're doing at Carnegie Mellon University.
Thank you.
And onwards and upwards.
I'm in the Modern Languages Department in the Second Language Acquisition Program.
Absolutely. All right. Any closing thoughts? And I know we got some announcements. Treble?
I just want to say I am extremely grateful for you sitting down and talking with us, because you taught me a lot just by listening to everything that you were saying. And you provided not only us, but our viewers with the context that is needed to understand why there's a mixed reaction to the death of the Queen. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, for hosting me. And thank you for, being my entryway into Black Pittsburgh, where I want to dwell.
Oh, that means two things.
Let's get it.
Come on, let's go.
That means two things. BlackPittsburgh.com.
Yeah,
yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know it's a lot, so I really appreciate you trusting us, and thank you so much to your partner as well. Just love y'all.
I took the time to come here, and I do get a lot of requests, but because you are Black people working for us, and I want to be a part of this community and what you're doing. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much.
This is Constructive Argument on Radio Biafra with Mazi Onoha. Bring your argument. All right, welcome back once again. Of course, it is Radio Biafra. This is Hello Motherland, and I thank you all for joining us this evening for History Lesson.
Mazi.
Good evening and welcome to Constructive Argument. Thank you very much, Mazi. We need to go ahead straight. It is an hour that we have this evening. If you can take it from now to the top of the hour, Biafrans are listening. Please go ahead.
Greetings to all Biafrans. Regards to our leader, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, and we pray shortly that he be released. It's been a privilege and an opportunity to share with you the history that brought Biafra about. And we're still in the history. It's dynamic, it has not stopped. And we are therefore living the history. So before further ado, so the usual protocol for everyone respected, thank you all for listening. So let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, strength of my Redeemer. Sing. Mazi Ike, some of the tracks you played are quite interesting. Thank you for playing this track. I was trying to sing I was trying to sing Always Way before, which that is exactly where we were before Biafra was declared. My talk this evening will be from Aburi to the declaration of Biafra, because that's when everything unraveled. Most of you understand the Aburi Accord. Events that led to it, but after the Aburi, until the 30th of May, things moved very, very fast. And therefore, I'm going to try and unmask as much of it as possible. I was also happy listening to Assam Pity Special when you played it. It's one of those music where when you go to a party in those days, those who can't dance, so those who have 2 feet like me, and those who are sitting on the wheelchair, those who have got delay actually get up and dance. It was a wonderful track. And then the Ikenga's
Superstar.
Long Live Africa. The interesting thing about that one was with the group of Biafran soldiers, when they got when the war ended, they had nothing much to do, no employment, so they formed bands, and that was one of the tracks from that group. It's a party shaker, as in those days. So thank you for playing them.
It's a pleasure.
We're going back to this Aburi. What exactly happened from the 4th and 5th of January 1960s was that an attempt was made to calm nerves, to find a solution to how do you now live together in a country where a section of population have been massacred. They ran back to their villages, awaiting further instructions. They told the Ojukwu, don't go. You can't trust these people. He said, let's go this extra mile. They went there, they discussed, they came up with solutions that will save the country and unite everybody, and they tried to patch things up. At the end of the accord, Ojukwu and Gowon were eating with the same plate. Most of you will see the video. I think Gowon put a meatball in his mouth and Ojukwu picked some rice. And none of them used a long spoon or a long fork. They were eating from the same plate. So something very, very strange happened when they got back, Ojukwu to the eastern part and Gowon to Lagos. What we believe happened was that Gowon was given some strange instructions. And rather than announce as now the head of the government, remember, before Aburi, Gowon was not recognized by Ojukwu as the head of the government because he had a coup. At that moment in time, the commander-in-chief, Major General J.T. Aguiyi, was missing, although we knew he was killed. He was not being declared as killed because Gowon took over power. So it was at Aburi that Gowon was conferred the actual privilege of being the supreme head of the Nigerian government by the Eastern delegation. Because up until then, the East have not recognized him. So people forget to know that. So Ojukwu had to recognize Gowon, who is if you like, hasn't got a higher rank than Ojukwu himself in the military. But in the military, depends on the rank. Gowon rank is less than Adebayo, who was the governor of the West. He's no more than Ojukwu's one, because they're about the same. In fact, the person ruling the Navy was more superior than all of them. Yet Gowon, because of people backing him with a gun, made him the head of state. So at the gunpoint, he was made head of state, but it was the Aburi that they all agreed, including Ojukwu, that he should be pronounced the head of state. When he got back, therefore, Ojukwu couldn't announce everything that was decided at Aburi. He had to wait for Gowon to do so. On arriving, rather than announce it, Gowon gave the impression he was ill. He had a cold. He couldn't make the announcement. People were looking at Ojukwu, what did you guys discuss? Ojukwu said, well, you just have to wait. It went well, we're okay, and so on and so forth. So, days passed by, nothing happened. A few days further, nothing happened. So Ojukwu began to think, what is going on? So this is really where Nigeria unhinged. Because what was happening at this stage was Gowon was getting instructions from his permanent secretaries and perhaps from foreign people who were advising him that these three people decided that Buri is not going to work because it's going to be a way of dividing Nigeria, pushing them into a confederacy instead of one country united. But what they forgot was that what they decided at Aburi was a way of patching something that was broken. They are one country still, but what was decided was to have individual regions running their affairs. You can't have an Igbo person now going back to the north because Ojukwu told them to return and they were killed. You can't say that the second time. No one will listen to him. They've been chased out of Lagos. They can't go back. There's no guarantee for their safety. So there's a need for them to stay in their separate regions until temper cools. Okay? So that was what people misinterpreted as confederation. If you're running the eastern region, you're going to have a police force, your army, your area of command, you look after that area. The same for the north, the same for the west, the same for the Midwest. So that's what was agreed. And they agreed on certain formulas on how to share their revenues and resources and so on and so forth. But if you then start going back on those terms, and they're supposed to, part of the clause, if you change a clause, you have to talk to other governors of those regions so you have concurrence. Everyone agrees. So no one is left out, no one is pushed away, there's no suspicion. So all these things was in place as a safety. And the Ojukwu's group and the rest of Nigeria's group, their secretaries, they read through the minutes of the communique, the minutes of the discussion. Ankara himself, the Ghanaian head of state, also went through it and asked them, are you people happy with this? Yes. Would you want to change anything? They said no. They signed it. Ojukwu and Gowon apparently was driven to their respective airports or planes by Ankara himself, and both of them sat in the same car. So it was very, very strange when Gowon started talking about things which was not decided and signed, gramophone, tape-recorded conversations at Aburi. So I've been emphasizing this Aburi because if Ojukwu tell people to go back to the north and they were killed, he can't say that again. He goes to Aburi and they make a statement, and then you don't agree on or honor that statement, they're not going to listen to him anymore. Remember, at this stage, there's nowhere safe to go and have a conversation or have meetings in Nigeria up until then. So it was a very strange situation. So I summarize it by pulling out a comment which Ojukwu made in when the confusion started. Gowon eventually made a statement and started retracting, changing what was published in Aburi. So Ojukwu, I just pulled this out, he said, anybody who was present at Aburi meeting and has read the minutes, the communique, the statements, verbatim report, in other words, line by line, would be surprised that a person who calls himself a head of state, now Ojukwu talking about Gowon, could so deliberately mislead accredited representatives of foreign governments by saying that the implementation of each item of the conclusions required prior detailed examination by the administrative and professional experts in the various fields. Put in a simple language, you as head of government, the highest authority in the land, have gone and made a decision. You then come back, it's like the cabinet in the UK, the government in the UK have gone somewhere, made a decision. You then come back and your permanent secretary say, no, we're not going to agree with this plan. You tell them what to do. They don't tell you what to do. And the delicate nature of the situation is such that your permanent secretary can only advise you. They can't change the content of the communique. So Gowon was saying, hiding behind the permanent secretary, and said, these people are giving us a different advice. But they're not running the country. You are. Okay. So the conclusions in Aburi were no proposals, but decisions. That's what Ojukwu is saying. They were not proposals. We're not proposing this is what we ought to do. These were decisions taken by the highest authority in the land. Okay. So this topic is called On Aburi We Stand. So if the highest authority in the land are taking decision concluded in Aburi, how can you then start changing it unilaterally? Remember, part of the content was if you change it, you have to get the concurrence. Everybody who signed the paper have to agree. You can't then change it unilaterally and expect everybody else to agree with you. So it doesn't work that way. So-called gentleman's agreement. They're officers and gentlemen. They should honor what is signed. Not that honoring it is going to devalue or put any other part of Nigeria into if you like, under bondage. By honoring it, you're respecting every part of Nigeria equally. You're not victimizing anybody. You're trying to soothe or find a balm for those who have been injured and try and alleviate their suffering. You're not there to dictate to anybody. So then he says that what happened, in fact, Ojukwu was saying, was that specific matters, namely the decrees and section of decrees to be repealed, the mechanics of army reorganization, the question of rehabilitation refugees were referred to experts. You have made a decision, now experts, you go ahead and do it. Okay, so the meeting of the financial experts to be considered the question of rehabilitation, displaced persons, has not been held because the Ministry of Finance has not come round to doing that. Okay, the meeting would serve any useful purpose. They haven't done that. So the army experts met and reached agreement, but these were rejected. So the finance people have not met yet. Then Ojukwu continued to say, Lieutenant Colonel Gowon told the heads of missions, now this is very important. You are the head of government, so people want to know what happened in Aburi. Remember, the British want to get hold of this information because Nigeria was created by them. Nigeria is owned by them. Whatever decision you made, it's like you're having your own constitution. Every constitution prior to then was made in London. Your 53 constitutions, Macpherson's, Richards, all these constitutions were made outside Nigeria. Now this one, you're making it in Ghana. And you came back, it's going to alter whatever the British have organized. They don't want to hear it. They want to make sure they understand it. So, Ojukwu said Lieutenant Colonel Gowon told the heads of missions that the agreement about returning the regions to the position before January 17th, that also meant, in effect, that the federal government in Lagos will continue to carry on its function as before. That is right. In other words, what they did in Aburi was to say all the decrees issued by the military since January 66, we're going to repeal them. We're going to cancel them. Because Aguirre wanted the country to be united and unitary, Decree 34, but they've decided at Aburi, we're going to cancel all those, okay? We're no longer going to go ahead with those. But then Ojukwu said that Gowon failed to inform the world that the decision taken at Aburi, the federal government meant no more than the Supreme Military Council. Okay, no one, of course, who knows the sort of advice Gowon was receiving in Lagos would be surprised by the suppression and distortion of truth. So he said that Gowon has already started changing what was decided. So he says the actual Aburi decisions, for those who are following the history, reads as follows. Members, Ojukwu said, agree that the legislative and the executive authority of the Federal Military Council government should remain in the Supreme Military Council, to which any decision affecting the whole country should be referred for determination, provided that, were it possible for the meeting to be held, then the matter requiring determination must be referred to military governors for their comments and concurrence. If you make a decision, you got to allow all the governors to come together and make a decision. Okay? I'm going to go very quickly because there are various things Ojukwu said in this statement which is rebutting what Gowon was saying, dishing out to the foreign press and saying, this is what we talked about in Aburi. So Ojukwu said, no, these are not what we said. And he therefore decided the best thing to do is to come up with the idea of playing this long gramophone if necessary, okay? So that everybody would know what was decided. He said it's a clear statement, the question is prepared to distort the verbatim. So it is clear, he summarized, that Gowon was prepared to distort the statement, okay, or the verbatim report of a Aburi meeting. And therefore to help the public informed the Eastern Nigerian Broadcasting Service will be playing the tape records, yes, and proceeding live at scheduled times. Arrangements have been made to transform these tape recordings into long playing gramophone records. He said, we are also going to ahead to print and publish the documents and records of our Aburi meeting. We in the East, he said, are anxious, and that's to say the least, to see that our difficulties are resolved by peaceful means and that Nigeria is preserved as a unit. But it is doubtful, and the world must judge, whether Lieutenant Colonel Gowon attitudes and their exhibitions of his insincerity are something which can lead to a return of normalcy and confidence in the country. That's a very damning thing to say. He said, I must warn all Easterners once again to remain vigilant. The East will never be intimidated, nor will she acquiesce, in other words, agree, to any form of dictation. It is not our intention to play the aggressor. Nonetheless, it is not our intention to be slaughtered in our beds. We are ready to defend our homeland. Fellow countrymen and women, on Aburi we stand. There will be no compromise. God grant us peace in our time. So this is really, I had to read that out so we all understand that when the people said on Aburi we stand, it is the last bus stop. There's nowhere else to go if Nigeria reneged or messed up the Aburi Accord. So that is the reason why I'm drumming on this. Okay, so Ojukwu therefore fired that warning to Gowon. He should stop meddling, trying to tinker the agreement that was agreed. Don't try and change it. Start implementing it. Okay? If you don't want to implement it, well, I'll have no choice but to find a way of resolving the problem for those people who are desperate to need help from the government. Remember, the people of Eastern origin have been killed, and the government is supposed to be running around to sort things out, but they're not doing that. That is where it's hurting the East a lot. January 26, Gowon held a press conference in Lagos, which he reported to reveal the agreement of the Aburi meeting. Remember, he had a meeting and said, this is what we decided. Ojukwu will say, my goodness, this is not what we talked about. So the text of the press conference appears to be based not on the minutes of the final agreement of Aburi, but on the criticisms of those documents by the permanent secretaries. Reading the two press secretaries, reading two side by side, one wonders whether Gowon was really present at Aburi. So that's how bad the disparity between what Gowon was saying and what was discussed. It's like somebody else who wasn't even there was talking about it, criticizing what they decided. But that isn't what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be implementing what was happening. Okay? So, Ojukwu then went on to say that if the Aburi Agreement are not fully implemented by the 31st of December, okay? If you don't implement them by 31st of March, of 1967, remember, the conference was held on the 4th and 5th of January. February went, March just faffing around, doing nothing, exchange of words, playing with press. So Ojukwu said if by 31st the agreements we decided have not been acted upon because it's the Eastern people who need most help, the refugees need rehabilitated. If you're not going to implement it, Ojukwu said, I shall have no alternative but to feel free to take whatever measures may be necessary to give effect in this region to those agreements. What is he saying? If the central government in Lagos are going to run away from their responsibility, I, Ojukwu, will do something to help those who are in desperate need of rehabilitation. Okay? So that is how far the Aburi Accord had degenerated. Okay? So then what happened was that Ojukwu was then, because the significance of 30th of March is to do with financial year. So whatever has happened, 1966, we're now going to finish in financial year, it's a bit like the British one, 31st of March, because the 1st of April is the beginning of the new financial year. So whatever we've done, at the end of the financial year 31st, we need to decide what to do going forward. Okay. So, on the 31st, so therefore there's something called Survival Edict. Okay? Revenue Allocation Edict. Let me explain that. When the 1st of April came, the East felt necessary that from there on, when we collect taxes, rather than pay direct to the government in the Lagos, we use it to look after those who are in need of rehabilitation. That was step one in the beginning of the headaches that led to Nigeria unraveling. Okay? So, for 4 months since Aburi, nothing has happened. Right? So, therefore, one of the reasons that Ojukwu did that was to make sure these people did not starve. Some salaries haven't been paid. Okay? And so on and so forth. I'll read a bit more for you. Right. So, when Ojukwu said this is what he's going to do, on the day the departure of Eastern Nigeria was fully expected, journalists arrived in Enugu for a press conference. Because when Ojukwu said that, people rushed to Enugu to go and hear what was going on. Okay? So, instead, they're simply talking about one Nigeria. Ojukwu told them that he was issuing a revenue edict, appropriating all federal revenue collected in the East as a means of paying for the rehabilitation program. Remember, they've started a rehabilitation program, but no one was funding it. And Aburi Accord was supposed to fund it, but it wasn't. So Ojukwu had to collect taxes to fund it. So the decree did not affect oil revenues. Very, very important. Ojukwu didn't say those who are in the East collecting money and selling oil should pay me revenue direct. Nigeria will be threatened because they need that oil money. So Ojukwu is saying these are the tax we collected from people, company taxes and so on. Because the oil revenue, interestingly, is paid direct to Lagos. So Ojukwu was not asking for that. He's asking to collect tax and use the tax which he collects from the East. Rather than handing over to the Lagos, use it for the rehabilitation. Okay. So now, So, as Ojukwu said, this decree did not affect Orio, as I said, and these were collected. Now, the reporter was stunned. All the reporters were amazed. He said, how come? They had expected fire and brimstone, therefore to confront and say the physical problem that Ojukwu was pulling out. Ojukwu wasn't pulling out. He was trying to find a peaceful way of resolving the problem. So Ojukwu told them that the East would only pull out of Nigeria if she were attacked or blockaded. Okay? So here we go. People rushed in to go and hear Ojukwu when he says, if by the 31st nothing happened, we'll do this. So they came and they want to hear, when are you pulling out from Nigeria? When is he seceding? She said, we're not seceding, but we will consider, we'll pull out of Nigeria if we are attacked or blockaded. Remember, the people in the East are now mixed up of those who are returnees from Lagos, from Ibadan, from Ilorin, from Sokoto, from Kanu, from Kaduna. They've all run back and with nothing doing, most of it. So the federal government, instead of doing something about what Ojukwu was saying, they gave their own decree, Decree 8. They issued a fresh decree, Decree 8. That's a document that appeared at first glance to implement major points of constitutional arrangements agreed in Agburi. Now this is very tricky. They brought out a paper saying, this is what we're going to do. When you look at it, you think, oh, they're going to agree, they're going to implement Agburi Accord. But it is not the fiscal arrangement. The Decree 8, like Agburi, vested the legislature and executive powers of the Supreme Council. And what it did, the decisions was made, vital matters could be taken only by agreement with only two governors. But however, it gives autonomy. The federal government have the final say of what they did or who did what, which is against what Agburi said. Agburi said we'd all have to agree as a way of removing suspicion. But if you then bring out a decree saying the federal government have the right to veto and decide what to do, you're no longer going in the spirit of Agburi. Remember, there's tension in the country. So, what then happened is this. 4 months after the Agburi, they printed a new version, and it's very, very clever. Skillfully, they worded that, and it looks harmless indeed when you look at it, but you have to look at the main paragraph. It says, one of the extra clauses was that the fact that the regional governors could not exercise their powers, right? If you're Ojukwu, you're not allowed to exercise your power so as to impede the prejudice the authority of the federation. Translated, it means Ojukwu cannot do anything without the prior consent of Gowon in the central government, and anything that the central government feels is going to undermine them, they will not allow it to go through. So if Ojukwu wants to feed his people, and the central government says, I'm not going to allow you, then it will not go through. So they'll be dictating to the East, which is not what agreement was reached at Agburi. So the next one, so Gowon decides precisely what he would impede. So Gowon is the one who decides what would impede or what would prejudice the authority. It's like a rule you made, you haven't decided what is actually inside it, but you say, I have every right to change this particular rule, but you don't tell us what the rules are. Okay. Another section of the Decree 8, which was brought out after Ojukwu decided to collect tax from his region. And the federal government, Decree 8, said to take over the authority of the regional government, which was endangering the continuance of the federal government. And again, the creation was, the criteria was again apparently Lagos. So there's another part of this new clause, which Gowon issued unilaterally, that within it, the central government have the right to take over any region if they deem that they're going away from the dictate of the center. It's like imposing a dictatorship, and which they have not decided at Aburi. The next one, most menacing of all, the Eastern Eyes. And this is important. The important thing here was a paragraph under which a state of emergency. Now, this is very critical. Remember, Tafawa Balewa government used state of emergency in the Middle Belt, state of emergency in the Western region, just to bring the army and start shooting and killing people and causing all sorts of chaos. You have Wild West as a result of state of emergency. Now, Gowon is bringing that within this Decree 8, the government in Lagos has the right to declare the state of emergency, right, on any region when, with the agreement of only 3 of the military governors. Why only 3? Remember, there were 4: Northern, Western, Midwest, and East. So you don't no longer need concurrence of all the people. You can only now use only 3. So what that means, you're isolating the East. So if they go it alone, 3 of you will gang up and declare state of emergency. So that is what made the East very, very suspicious. You have now brought in a new decree without concurrence, without discussion, and saying 3 governors, if they agree, to go ahead. Okay? And the other 3 governors, they are not independent. The governor in the West has northern soldiers camped in his country. The Midwest hasn't got enough firepower. So whatever the center says, Gowon says will go, because the others cannot say no. So Juku was being isolated. So Juku saw this as being specifically anti-East. So that decree was not saying anything to alleviate the suffering, the burden of refugee, the rehabilitation program, but everything was against the East. So he therefore rejected the decree. So therefore, there was growing unpopularity of Gowon's regime, okay, is now causing the southern part of Nigeria to actually become one, because they're looking at him and said, what is going on here? We went to Aburi, and you're giving a new order without any instruction to anybody beforehand. So now, Q, the Western region, the Yoruba people, there was growing resentment over the failure, first of all, to remove the northern troops who are sitting in Ibadan, who are garrisoned in Lagos, Ikeja. So they wanted them returned to the north, because that's what Aburi said. But Gowon wasn't budging, okay, because that's what was stated. So Chief Awolowo led the actual protest. Following this tradition, so it's made among the, as you know, Chief Awolowo was locked up in prison. They accused him of sedition under Balewa's government. He was released by Agi Irensi, but Gowon, when Agi Irensi was killed, the day Awolowo was going to be released, Gowon jumped in and released him. So the Yoruba thing that Gowon released Awolowo. So Awolowo is now at large in the West and is following what is going on. So he mentioned to the leaders of thought in the West, these are the powerful people in the Western region, Yoruba leaders of thought. They all met in Ibadan. And he said, it's in his considered opinion that some of the demands from the East are actually, they're not altogether perfect, but he said they're excessive. Within the context of the Nigerian Union, most of such demands are not only well-founded, the things are well-founded, but are designed for smooth and healthy association within the various nations units in Nigeria. And what are we saying, in effect, that most of what the Eastern region are demanding are reasonable, and they are designed to allow them to cohabit with the rest of Nigeria. So Chief Awolowo, who was just has been to the east to see Ojukwu and as a witness. And he was the one who would understand the feelings in the east. Because if you've been there, as one of the music was playing, Onwuzuruwa, it was playing there, everybody was a big town because you have a relative who went to the north who may not have returned, some from Lagos who didn't make it, some who maybe have wounds. So you are constantly reminded of the pressure that the eastern region were under. So there was a lot of sympathy for the refugees to go. Awolowo, who went to the east to see, to feel the pain of the east and understand their concerns and the anxiety over the Aburi Accord not being implemented. So, to cut a long story not so short, Gowon said, Awolowo said, if the East decided to pull away by one reason or the other, by omission or commission, the West will have no choice but also consider pulling out of the Federation. So this rattled Gowon, because he feels that if the East pull away, the West pull away, then Nigeria more or less is finished. And the Northerners, they will have a real job if they're going to attack the East, going it alone. Remember, Nigeria is on a tripod, North, East, and West. So if the North can get the West on their side, then they can bully the East. Likewise, if the East and West could come together, this handshake across the bridge, this River Niger, this handshake across River Niger, the North cannot dictate too much to those two together. So, Gowon has a decision to make. Okay, so this is how he solved his problem. Remember that the North and the West were somewhat in collusion in this tripod thing, because the Obas of Yoruba land in October 66, they went up to the north to thank the emirs for not killing the Yorubas. Let me just explain that. Up in the north, there were Yoruba people and Eastern people. There were Westerners and Easterners. They were all in the north. The northern pogrom, they planned to just get rid of the Igbos. Sometimes when the Igbos escape from their house and they run into the Yoruba, if you're lucky, the Yoruba person can help you if you're a real friend. If you're real enemies, they say they're not going to help you or they chase you out. So the Yorubas were large extent spared. Remember I said last time, you can tell if somebody's Yoruba, most of them have tribal marking. If they're Hausa, you also have tribal marking, but the Igbos didn't have so much tribal marking. So you can identify in that sense. So the Obas of Yoruba land, the chiefs and elders, they went up to the north and thanked the emirs for sparing the Yorubas. So that's number one. Now, so they're beginning to work together to make sure their people are not, exposed to killings. But they have military camped in Ibadan and in Lagos, ready to pounce. These are the same military that was helping Tafawa Balewa's military. Tafawa Balewa's First Republic in suppressing the West because of the wild West. All the commotion that were going west. So I'm just saying that as by the way. Awolowo, therefore, Gowon and Awolowo need to work together with the Obas of the West to make sure the Yoruba people are safeguarded. So what then happened was that it was in late April. Remember, we started this call from January 67. We're now in April. So Awolowo went and said that if the East pulled out, once again, the West will pull out. So this was a big, big problem for Gowon and the Northern and the those who are plotting and planning how to dominate Nigeria. So what the Northerners did then, because they can sense the feeling in the East, they can also sense the feeling in the West. So they have to find a way of dividing them. So what they did, the Northerners suddenly changed their mind and said that they will now welcome any plan to divide the North into more states. That's a master coup. If you say you're going to now make the North, allow it to be divided in many states, this is exactly what Awolowo was looking for, because the North was like a monolith, one block. If you have a way of dividing them so they have different states, that will weaken them to allow someone like Awolowo in the East to operate. The North has always refused dividing the North. So the leaders in the North came up with this idea. Okay? They were before that irrevocably committed. They were not allowing any sense of talking about Middle Belt or Far North or whatever. So for the first time, they decided they're now committed to creation of states. I don't know if anybody really appreciates the significance of this. So with that, that is the carrot that Gowon needs to weaken the growing link between Awolowo and Ojukwu. Okay? Because Awolowo loves to hear that the North could be divided into states. And the Northerners said this like carte blanche. North should be irrevocably committed to the creation of states, whether or not they are created elsewhere. Let me repeat that. They don't mind the northern region being divided to various states, and that is whether or not other states in other regions are divided into states anyway, because one of these states is bigger than the East put together anyway, if they divided them. So, on the basis of the stability of the North, also the entire federation, to urge the federal government to take immediate steps to set in motion the machinery for the creation of these states. So we are now around, I think, April 67. So the Northerners suddenly decided, we don't mind states being created, by the way, and you can create them without creating states everywhere else. So Gowon picked up on this complete change of heart. He picked up on that and decided that it would be a good idea to create new states. So Gowon now started talking about new state creation. This appealed or appeased Awolowo's sentiment. On top of it, Gowon approached Awolowo and made him the Commissioner for Finance and the Deputy Chairman of the Supreme Council in this new government, where he's bringing some civilians into government. So it's like a military, civilian, if you like, government, but no one from the East, of course. So you have in the federal government, Gowon bringing Awolowo in, and then he went and found Tifenahoro, who was in prison with Awolowo. He's also been released. Tifenahoro is from it's a minority tribe from the Middle West. So he brought him into the government. He brought in Joseph Taka, who is the mid-belt, actually, TV's, it's not the core North. So what Gowon did there was to widen and weaken the broad base in the North by pulling in, bribing Awolowo with the finance ministry job and chairman of this government, so that Awolowo is no longer going to go close to the East. He's divided them away from the East. In so doing, he isolated the East and pulled the government of Nigeria into one. So you have the North with the military and the Western part now singing from the same hymn sheet. So that isolated the Ojukwu and the East. Having done that, he would then turn to the East. So let me go a little bit quicker. So what then happened is that when Ojukwu decided from the 1st of April to collect the revenue for survival edict and pay to people in this region who are suffering, need rehabilitation, what Gowon did was to cause an economic blockade in the east. He stopped the postal service. He did the postal orders, the cables, the telephone, the telex. So there's no form of communication. Why? Because it all goes through Lagos. So you can't communicate outside eastern Nigeria to other countries. So he cut that off. He brought the boat and is sure nobody should sail into the east. So he blockaded. So the east is now being cut off and the war hasn't even started. And as I mentioned in some of the talks, things like salt started becoming a scarce commodity because you're not importing anything. So Ojukwu, who's collecting tax to help rehabilitate his people, now finding there are no boats coming in and you can't phone outside to complain to anybody. And then on top of it, the planes coming into the east were also cut off. You're not allowed to fly in. Nigerian Airways was also banned from flying to the east. So you're already being surrounded and cut off. So Ojukwu then had another press conference with Reuters. And he said, I think we are now rolling downhill. Yeah? So he said it would take a great deal to halt the momentum. We are very close. Very, very close. What that means is that if you're now going to cause an economic blockade in the east, remember what Ojukwu said, there are two ways of killing somebody. You put a gun and shoot them, or you can starve them to death, which is in a way prophetic, because that's exactly what Nigerians use. They use starvation as a weapon of war. He's blockaded these people already, cut them off from international contact, and the war hasn't even started. So Ojukwu was saying, if they invade us or blockade us, we will succeed. It's like Gowon is taking, each time Ojukwu says something, Gowon tightens the noose and tries to push him towards secession. It's like he's being pushed away from Nigeria. But Gowon at the same time is securing the western part to support him in this coming war. Okay? Someone would ask, what's happened to the Midwest? Well, Midwest said they were going to be neutral. Ejo was neutral. Ejo is the military governor of the Midwest. He wasn't getting involved. He wanted his zone to be neutral. So, we're now May 20th. So, what then happened is that there were still people, just as Ojukwu said, we're now very close. They were pulling apart. So, last-ditch effort. To be fair, this time it was the National Conciliation Committee, headed by the new Federal Chief Justice, Sir Adetukumbo Ademola, is a Yoruba person, and then including Awolowo. They visited Ojukwu for the last time, the 7th of May, 1967. Once again, they listened to Ojukwu's views, they listened to the problems they're having, they accepted all his demands, and called on the federal government to implement these demands. These demands included implementation of what was agreed in Aburi, okay, and also the posts the troops back to their regions of origin, and the call of the economic sanction. Okay, so the people who visited Ojukwu went back to Gowon and said, these people are being tortured unnecessarily. You need to call off all the sanctions. They don't make sense. So on the 20th of May, Gowon accepted all the recommendations, but it was another illusory hope. He said he's agreed to now de-escalate, but he announced that the ban on Nigerian Airways flights to the east was lifted, although with other sanctions. Yeah. However, the director of the Nigerian Airways said privately, no one have told him, given an order to resume flights, so he wasn't going to carry that out either. So Gowon will say one thing, but behind, something else was going on. So if he lifted the order, he just tell the director of Nigerian Airways to start flying to the east straight away, but he didn't do that. Now, the troops moving away from the east was part of a Aburi Accord. Colonel Katsina, who was, of course, now he used to be the governor of the northern region. He was made the chief of staff when Gowon became the commander-in-chief, as he made himself. So Katsina then flew from Kaduna to Ibadan and informed the troops that they were going away from Ibadan. What did he do? He moved them to Ilorin. Ilorin, as you know, is in Kwara State now, but it's really next door to Ibadan. Yeah, Ilorin is on the same road, a stone's stone away from the border between west and north, and within the snap of the moment, they can return back to Lagos and to Ibadan. Yeah, so although the troops are moved away from the west, they're not too far away. If they need it, they can return immediately and start doing whatever it is they want to do. Okay, so what's happening in the east? Well, the clamor in the east, most people, if you listen to that song, Omuzuruwa, they're still mourning, they're still feeling rejected. So they're asking Ojukwu, please pull us out. We've had enough. Can't go on like this. So the clamor for Ojukwu to return to her friend to bear. So on the 26th of May, 1967, he called over 300 members of Consultative Assembly of Chiefs and Elders. Yeah, 335 of them. They all gathered in to find out, what do we need to do now? If we leave things as they are, we have to answer to the dictates, for one, and they will be telling us what to do for the rest of our lives. If we assert our autonomy, it's going to be tough because there's going to be a lot of hardship. So Ojukwu gave them all the options that if they assert their autonomy and declare self-independent, it's going to be hard going. But that's the only way, if you like, to consider surviving. So this is really where we are. So you've seen all the steps that was taken after Aburi to now 26th of May, when these people gathered to decide the fate of the people in the East, whether to continue in Nigeria or to find a way out and start afresh. These people are the ones that built Nigeria. They've abandoned their precious goods and so on. Now they run back to the East and no one is listening to them. So it's very, very critical, the next step. So when they met on the 26th, it was a 2-day conference. They deliberated, and as I said in the previous talks, the voting was unanimous, and it's from every nook and cranny of the eastern region. No one was left out. Whichever tribe you are, whichever region, province, you were well represented. So it was a unanimous decision on the 27th to pull out eastern region and make it a sovereign state called Biafra. So they gave Ojukwu the mandate. As soon as that meeting ended, Gowon declared the state of emergency. So they have given Ojukwu the mandate. Ojukwu didn't declare immediately. What happened was Gowon decided to push the button. On the 27th, on the same day, he came an emergency announcement. There will now be an emergency. I've taken over. There's going to be there's a state of emergency. I've declared. So let me just try and put this. It's not my own words. Okay. So mandate was given to Ojukwu It's not necessarily for secession, but at the earliest practicable date, to declare Eastern region a sovereign state. Okay? So Gowon decided to declare a state of emergency on the same day, simultaneously published a decree dividing Nigeria into 12 new states. Now, he had an option about the north, dividing it because it's so big, but in the east, he divided a tiny place into 3 places. Okay? And there was no consultation of the people who live in those places. There was no boundary that you know of. He just carved places up. To make the matter worse, to really, really provoke the Easterners. Okay, so there were tiny states, 3 tiny states. Each of them, if you left them on their own, they're isolated. And the East Central State, which he called, is where he joined a dot. And this is now where the Easterners of the Igbo origin are going to be. He removed Port Harcourt away from them, which is an Igbo state, and made it the capital of River State. As I said before, Port Harcourt, in effect, and most people will know, used to be an Owerri province, was built by both the Igbos and the riverine people. So to suddenly come and carve it away from the Igbo people, their houses there, some of them have abandoned everything, and some have the housing. So it was very, very difficult. So the government saying the same broadcast, okay, he announced the imposition of a blockade. He reimposed the blockade. So what Gowon had done there is like an open challenge. Ojukwu, you've now been given a mandate, but I dare you to secede. Who would have thought in Aburi we discussed no use of force? There should be unanimity when we decide things. In other words, you consult people before you divide them into states. None of this. Gowon was deliberately rolling out program after program of challenge. And the world turned around and said Ojukwu was rebelling. You see, it was twisted round. So it was like an open challenge. You can't provoke anyone more than Gowon provoked the East. Yeah? So I dare you people to do your worst. I want you to succeed. Yeah? So that is really where we are. So for the short period, so this is what Gowon said. Decree 8, he said, has been abrogated. Decree 8 has some elements of Aburi. He cancelled it. And he says it's now going to take full powers, an emergency declaration for the short period, quote unquote, for the short period necessary to carry out the measures which are now urgently required. What exactly is urgently required now? Yeah, people have had a meeting about how they're going to carry on associating with a part of the country. You said now as a state of emergency, you're going to come in and do what you like with your army, and you dare them to secede. So therefore, on the 30th of May, in the early hours, Ojukwu called diplomats, journalists to the State House in Enugu, okay, to hear what Ojukwu has to say following the meeting. This is, of course, Declaration of Independence of Biafra. And I'm going to read it out in full because it's a significant day for every Biafran. So you understand the setup from Aburi, all the goings on, all the, if you like, bad faith, pushing the Easterners instead of helping to, them to overcome the wound and the suffering and the pain. And this music, Onwuzurua, was playing. They have so much pain. They have been rejected in the country they helped to build. And now you say to them, I dare you. I've divided you now into 3. Okay? I didn't ask you where the boundaries are. I'm just going to say from now on, your river states, your cross-river state, your East Central State. So Ojukwu then called all this press, and this is what he said. fellow countrymen and women, you, the people of Eastern Region, Nigeria, conscious of the supreme authority of Almighty God over all mankind, for your duty to yourselves and posterity, aware that you can no longer be protected in your lives and in your property by any government based outside Eastern Nigeria, believing that you are born free and have certain inalienable rights which can best be preserved by yourselves, unwilling to be unfree partners in any association of a political or economic nature, rejecting the authority of any person or persons other than the military government of Eastern Nigeria to make any imposition of whatsoever kind or nature upon you, determined to dissolve all political and other ties between you and the former Federal Republic of Nigeria, prepare to enter into such associations, treaty, or alliance with any sovereign state within the former Federal Republic of Nigeria and elsewhere on such terms and conditions as best to subserve your common good, affirming your trust and confidence in me, having mandated me to proclaim on your behalf and in your name that Eastern Nigeria be a sovereign independent republic. Now, therefore, I, Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegwu, military governor of Eastern Nigeria, by virtue of the authority and pursuant to the principles recited above, do hereby solemnly proclaim that the territory and region known as and called Eastern Nigeria, together with their continental shelf and territorial waters, shall henceforth be an independent sovereign state of the name and title the Republic Biafra. So there you have it. Biafra came into existence, and it's all about security of the people. Thank you.
All right. Brilliant.
So, Mazi,
thank you.
How many more minutes have I got?
I think we are over the minute.
That's right.
Yes, but I think you wrapped up in time with the declaration.
Are you with me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Oh, all right.
Mazi, are you still there?
Let me unmute myself. Just a second. Yes, you can hear me now, right?
Yes, we have declared Biafra.
Yes.
It's come into existence.
Yes, and we are going to declare.
Right.
We are going to declare it again for the second time. Thank you very much, Mazi. And we are going to leave it here for today. The time is yes, and then of course I don't know what you're gonna be touching on next week on part 6.
Okay, I will talk about what happened after Biafra was declared.
All right.
Because the next step is the war, isn't it? When the war starts.
All right.
Okay. So grateful. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mazi. Thank you very much. You don't know, this means a lot to us. We are unlocking, many years of history, and that indeed counts for all Biafrans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care. So
all right.
There was euphoria. It was declared. Everybody was so pleased. You can now start afresh. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And of course, I will fulfill your last request again, which is the second song. I'm sure you will listen on the background. Thank you very much.